We welcome you to another live edition of The Sports Box, your go-to sports podcast featuring great content, conversation, and your occasional disagreement. Stick around to interact and ask questions. The Sports Box is brought to you by our sponsor, Showcase Sports, located on the White Horse Pike in Hamilton, New Jersey. Showcase Sports for the elite player. Ladies and gentlemen, it's showtime.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Sports Box NHL Stanley Cup Playoffs preview for 2023. And I figured the best people to talk about the playoffs are people that have no rooting interest in the playoffs because their teams didn't make it. Noah Deibler, Anthony Morella, myself, Brian Attard. Now, my team's in. Their teams are not. We'll start talking about that as the show goes on. But, gentlemen, listen, am I biased? Absolutely. But the NHL has the best playoffs in all of sports. If your team is in it, I've been known to say it is stress and nausea, potentially up to 2 months. You pretty much want to just off yourself repeatedly because you don't want to go through it, frankly. You're going to miss out on the rooting interest, but I think you're going to have a pretty stress-free couple of months. Anything you want to start off the show with, thoughts about your team or any team? Anything you want to get off your chest before we get into the meat of the program this evening?
Strange feeling not to have my team in the playoffs, but you know what? I'm not too beat up about it because, as I said on my own hockey show last Tuesday, whether or not the Pens made the playoffs or not, they would have won the exact same amount of playoff games, which is 0, because this team is just an absolute travesty right now. Retirement home, bunch of fossil fuels out there, so not looking good. But you know what? It'll be nice to watch the playoffs as a neutral fan, not have to worry about my team getting absolutely steamrolled in the first round again. So it should be an entertaining playoffs, lots of interesting matchups. But, Pittsburgh is not in the playoffs, so don't have to worry about them.
Well, at least all your dinosaurs are signed to long-term deals.
Yeah,
that's something going for you.
That's fun, yeah.
Not that my team's much better, but at least the guys that are signed long-term for the most part are youthful, except for Ryan Ellis and Sean Couturier.
Mike Faris, who was an avid viewer of Blue Truth, the Sports Box Ranger show, which I host, obviously. Let's go, Ranger. Let the fun and stress begin. It's only fun at the end, Mike. I really right.
Which will be in a couple days.
You would know, right? Anyway, well, let's kick it off here. So, when you consider, I had one thing that I wanted to add that I didn't add, so give me 3 seconds here. But before we get in here, I want to talk about the teams that didn't get it, because this year specifically, there were teams, and we always say this year to year, is like when you say who's going to get in next year that didn't get in this year, someone's got to come out, right? And when you consider the fact that for the first time in forever, you will not see Sidney Crosby in the playoffs, you will not see Alexander Ovechkin in the playoffs. You see a team like Calgary, who won their division a year ago, they're out. A team like the St. Louis Blues, who's in like every year, is not in the playoffs. This is the first time since 2006 that the Capitals and Penguins both missed in the same year. So a two-part question. Which teams that missed the playoffs for you were the biggest disappointments? And are we seeing a changing of the guard, especially given the fact that the faces of the league for the longest time won't be playing in April and May?
Loaded question. I think big disappointments. First of all, the one that really sticks out to me and the one I was most wrong on was the Flames, because I had them, at least if they didn't win the Pacific, I think they should have been right there. And the fact they just missed the playoffs completely, I thought was absolute travesty. I mean, Huberdeau just was not at the races. Their team just always seemed out of sync with their goaltending. Marks, I'm not a fan of Markstrom. He has his moments, but I think he's a bit too inconsistent. I think they need to try to fix that. I also thought the Blues very disappointing. If you told me before the year the Blues would be rebuilding and trading all their players at the deadline, I would have thought you were nuts. But I mean, they were just never at the races. It always seems like they were always multiple games below 500. and then they sold all their guys off. Other than that, I mean, I think for the most part, everything was kind of as I expected. I'm not going to say I'm disappointed in the Penguins because I said before the year, if they get in, there'll be a second wild card, and I could see them missing completely. So while other people might say it's a bit disappointing, I've always been very pessimistic on my expectations for them. Kind of the same thing for the Capitals. I mean, I think I had them in the playoffs in preseason, but I'm not shocked they missed at the same time. I will say I thought the Islanders were better than I thought they'd be. I thought they'd kind of be what the Caps were this year. But other than that, I think for the most part, everything was kind of what I expected. I'd say the Flames and Blues are really the two main ones for me.
For me, it's the Blue Jackets. I mean, you go out, you get Johnny Gaudreau. Zach Werenski gets hurt right away. You got some top picks that are be coming up soon. I mean, Jurczyk looks like an absolute stud overseas. So that's a team that's going to take that big jump. I think I had them in the playoffs this year.
You did.
Just fell way short of expectations. If they add a Connor Bedard, an Adam Fantilli, somebody like that, I mean, the sky is the limit for this team moving forward. They just have to get there, and then they have to show that they belong, and then they're going to be the team that's next to arrive.
But I think in the great scheme of things, I mean, for them, like you said, they're going to get another high pick in a deep draft. Had they gotten – this is the thing, right? Everybody gets on me because, especially in football, it's if you're not going to win, lose. If you're a team that's only going to get in cosmetically, like Noah said, right? He felt, whether you agree or disagree, he felt Pittsburgh, if they got in, was a quick out, like a cosmetic appearance. So at the end of the day, does that really do anything for you, move the needle? Absolutely not. So – I also thought Columbus would be better than they were. I wasn't as bullish as you were on them, but I thought they'd be better than they were, being that they were so active in free agency, bringing in a star player who didn't even want to go there, by the way, who wanted to go somewhere else.
Where?
Talk for a different day. But yeah, to me, the disappointment, probably I would agree with the Blues. When you look at it, there were 5 teams that were in the playoffs last year that didn't get in this year. The Penguins and the Capitals in the East, the Flames, the Blues, and the Predators out West. I'm not surprised at all with Nashville because I didn't really think that was going to go anywhere. I thought Calgary, I actually thought Calgary won the trade for Matt Tkachuk simply because Huberdeau is coming off just a stellar year. And you can say longer term, I would agree with you, but in the short term, I felt Calgary got actually flat to better. It didn't happen. And I don't know if that's a coaching thing or what it is. Chris Holtgren, let's go Rangers, let the run begin. That's right. I was talking to Chris earlier.
Coaching thing with Calgary?
Yeah, because I don't like Sutter at all. I don't think Sutter and Huberdeau meshed at all.
I know why you don't like Sutter.
Well, I will say this.
No, it has
I
nothing
think
to do with the Kings.
It doesn't have anything to do with them beating the Rangers.
Go back to it. Huberdeau and him did not mesh. Huberdeau's a very good player.
The thing with Sutter is I think he's a good coach. It seems like every other week I was reading something about some player on Calgary just absolutely hating his guts or him doing something the team disagreed with. I don't know.
It's because everybody's so soft nowadays, dude.
That's true.
Pro players, let's face it, they're soft. Granted, most of the guys, and not to cut you off there, no, sorry about that, but
you're good, man.
The guys on the Flyers, they're mostly young, so this is new to them with Tortorella style. But a guy like D'Angelo, he's crying all the time about it too. So they're soft, and I like D'Angelo. Don't get me wrong, but they're softer human beings for some reason.
But it's weird at the same time because, last year we talked about Huberdeau being, he was second in scoring only behind McDavid. And then this year, did he even crack 60 points? I think he had 55, 56, something. It was
way down.
Where did this fall off come from? It doesn't make sense to me now. Granted, I don't watch a ton of Calgary. I watch them here and there, but, it's just
15 goals, 40 assists.
So 55 points is just that's half of what he had the year before. I don't know if it's a chemistry issue.
It's actually less than that. He had $115.
Oh my God. That just makes
he had more points in 55 games in Florida in a shortened season.
Alexander Barkov.
Yeah. I don't get it, man. Calgary was definitely a weird one. But to answer the other part of the question,
Joe likes his cousin.
Okay,
D'Angelo. Hey, man, the burner accounts will love that praise
Paul
right there.
Bagliani also likes his cousin.
But anyway, Brian, about the change of the guard question, I'd say yes. Because, well, first of all, I mean, you have to consider guys like Crosby and Ovechkin. They're getting up there, mid-30s, whatnot. But also, and more importantly, they're not the best players in the league anymore. Now, I still think they're very good players. I'd even say Crosby's probably still a top 10 player in the league. But when you're talking, best players, you obviously McDavid, Draisaitl, Pasternak, loved what Jason Robertson did this year. Even Tage Thompson broke out, almost scored 50 goals. These guys aren't up there anymore. They're still very good, I think, on better teams where they're not quite literally the only player doing something. They could still, win a cup. But on the current teams they're at, I think they need more help than they're getting. They're not those guys anymore that are just going to carry that team farther than you expected to go to win that Stanley Cup anymore. I don't think they're at that level anymore, but they can still be productive.
We'll get into should they go into rebuild in the summer? Because I don't know what these teams are going to do. They probably really should. But I mean, I agree. I look at the Metro, and I see the three teams at the top of it, and I don't think there's a fourth. I think there's a clear delineation to the four.
Yeah,
in my opinion. I look at
it drops
the Atlantic's a little bit different, but the Metro specifically, I look at it, it's I don't know how anybody jumps these three teams. You
exactly why I think the Blue Jackets can jump up there.
The haves and the have-nots, especially in the East, are just widespread. But to that point, when you look at the teams that missed the playoffs this year, who do you think will make it next year? And there were teams who. So the big jumps this year, right? So the Devils went from 63 to 112 points, biggest jump in the league. Seattle 60 to 100, huge jump, and they got into the playoffs. But you look at the teams, especially in the East and especially in the Atlantic. Buffalo went from 75 to 91, they just missed. Ottawa went from 73 to 86, they missed. Detroit somewhat muted, but up 6 points from 74 to 80. Even the Flyers went from a lowly 61 to a equally low 75, but at least there was some improvement there, right? So when you look at it, the teams that just missed, the teams that were right in that 9, 10, 11, or however you want to approach it, who do you think can make the jump next year? What are the teams that you think we'll be talking about a year from now, previewing next year's playoffs?
I think the most obvious one for me is Buffalo. They're only 1 point behind the Panthers, but most importantly, their best players are all young guys. Thompson, Dahlin, they're both studs, and they're only going to get better as they develop. That Levy goalie that they signed that played towards the end of the year as well looks like he has really good potential as well. So I think they could make the jump. I think a team like the Flames has a chance. I mean, we have to see if Seattle can do that 2 years in a row, because that is a massive jump for them. Other than that, I mean, I think teams like the Predators, they're about to go into a rebuild, so I wouldn't say them. The Canucks are a weird one because it feels like every year they're not complete garbage. They're kind of, mid to high 80 points. I mean, maybe if they improve next year, make some right moves, they could maybe do something. In the East, it's a tough one because, like you said, Brian, I think the top of the Metro is so tough. So I don't know if anyone there would do it. And the Atlantic, it's always a crapshoot. I do like what Ottawa's doing, so maybe throw them in there. Detroit definitely improved, but they still, I think, are a bit of ways away from the teams ahead of them. But, I think the most obvious ones, I think Buffalo's an up-and-coming team. I think Calgary really underachieved this year, so they could do better next year. But it's tough because I look at all these teams in the playoffs, guys, and most of them I'm just like, these guys aren't going anywhere. There's so many really good teams in these playoffs. There's, other than maybe like the Islanders or whatever, there's not really many teams I see that are really surprising to me. And the Kraken, of course. I mean, no one expected the Kraken to get 100 points.
Not like this, no.
How about Dave Hackstall? How about
he was the problem in Philly, right?
Hackstall. I love it because everybody bashes Dave Hackstall and had nothing to do with Dave Hackstall. Was he the greatest coach in the world?
Hey, how about a 40-goal scorer, Jared McCann? The Pins protected Jeff Carter in the expansion draft over that guy. Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I like it. It's Buffalo, just simply on the fact of they have to break the streak, right? I mean, how long has it been? 13 years and counting now?
Wasn't it
look, The Undertaker was undefeated at WrestleMania for forever, and then he wasn't.
Well, right, exactly. So the streak hasn't. So this year will be the Brock Lesnar for the Buffalo Sabres. for my wrestling reference of the night. They have a lot of talent. To what Noah said earlier, the goaltending's going to improve. They've got some guys that they've drafted recently too. They're going to be top guys soon in this league. And the defense with Owen Power, Darlene, as you mentioned, they're going to be a force. So they get another higher pick this year. That's a team they're going to break their own streak, and hopefully the Flyers can go on a streak that they had and miss the playoffs over and over again and get a couple high picks in there. Some number one overall pick. That's what I'm hoping for. Flyers are not going to be one of these teams we're talking about, by the way.
They're about 10 years too late on a rebuild.
I know. Thank you. No, you got. There you go.
Balcony can't stay. I figured I'd just drop into the kid line's going to own Souls, Rangers in 6. I love my Blue Truth crowd's in tonight, so I appreciate them coming to support the Rangers there. When you look at this year's 16, the Sweet 16, if you will, as we bring in Brant Meeks, our resident Caps fan. Brant, we just talked about teams that were disappointments, so I'm glad you came on.
God, you feeling yourself after this decent regular season you had, huh?
Well, I had asked, are we seeing a major changing of the guard? And I want to just give it back to you because your team is involved in this, right? The first time since for Crosby and Ovechkin for both be out since 2006. From your vantage point, is this are the Capitals now in the flattening out on the bottom area now? Are they a non-playoff team next year? To you, just what's your view?
I don't think so. And the only reason I'm saying that is I think some of the teams that got in, I don't think will be able to maintain this next year. And I think when you look at how aggressive McClellan's going to be this offseason, they're going to try to retool and build because they don't care about the playoffs. I think we can all agree with this. The number one thing that everyone in this organization cares about is Ovechkin getting the goal scoring record. And so they are going to put as much around him as they can for the next few years to try to maximize it. And it's a very realistic goal. I think he ends up breaking it unless he ends up suffering some career-ending injury. I think he's got a great shot at breaking the record. I just jinxed it. It's going to happen next year.
Not going to work.
He's going to miss it by a game.
But yeah, no, I think they're going to be in a rebuild and retool. And hey, you look at Washington; they weren't a bad team. They just had a lot of bad injuries. You had Backstrom, who came off a hip resurfacing surgery in the offseason. You had Tom Wilson, who tore his ACL last offseason. Then you had John Carlson go.
That's a shame.
Yeah, you had John Carlson go down midway with a puck to the face that I think, it severed his temporal artery. That's insane. But they had back in December, they had 11-game win streak. They were really flying. But then they just had some injuries that happened at the wrong time. But I think huge disappointment is the Capitals and Penguins missing. We are seeing a changing of the guard because you have these teams getting older. And it's hard. And, Wayne Gretzky is still the greatest of all time. I think we can all agree with that. However, when Ovechkin gets it, he will officially be the greatest scorer of all time.
I've been told by some hobos it's actually Bobby Orr.
If they would hit the books as hard as they did people, then they'd be fine. Yeah. But that's not quite how that goes. But yeah, no, it is sad. It's for me because this was the first year I was my childhood. You talk about going back to my teenage years.
The music died.
This is terrible. This is some of the worst feeling I have ever had as a Capitals fan. But yeah, no, you're seeing the league go younger. You're seeing it with McDavid, Austin Matthews. You have these young guys coming in, and that's the next Crosby and Ovechkin. You're looking for that rivalry because Crosby and Ovechkin has lived up to the hype for so long, especially when Ovechkin finally got his. It really, for me, solidified that they are up there in terms of overall quality because until Ovechkin got one, it was obviously Sid, right? He's a better all-around player. But Ovechkin, to me, is the greatest goal scorer of all time.
Sure. Premier.
Yeah, the torch has been handed. Yeah. It has been passed on.
Yeah, the Rangers tried running that power play the Caps do, where they put Zibanejad in the court and then just take the shot. And they haven't defended that in Washington for 20 years. This year they're trying to defend it against the Rangers. So,
it's coming and he still beat you. It's amazing.
It really is. If you look at this crop of 16 and you look at the teams that are under the most pressure to walk away with the Stanley Cup this June, if you had to name 2, 3, 4 teams that you think stand out, that the pressure is on, right? I'll give you an example where the pressure is not on. The pressure is not on in Seattle. They are just very happy to be there. This is great. They're going to have a lot of fun. They're probably going to get their dicks kicked in by the defending champions, but they got it, right? So that's great. That they like that. You know, I don't necessarily know that there's a lot of pressure on Long Island because, let's put it this way, if the Penguins were half a hockey team, we're not talking about the Islanders in the playoffs to begin with, right? The Penguins let them in. They let them in. So is there pressure on Long Island? No. Where do you see teams that you feel really have a lot of pressure that if they don't win a Stanley Cup this year, it is a disastrous season?
I think there's 4 for me that really stick out. Number 1, Brian, your Rangers, I think, are an obvious one. I mean, the moves they made, trading for Patrick Kane, Vladdy Tarasenko, they got, a lot of money tied into their top guys with long-term contracts. They're going to have to give more guys contracts coming up soon. And, we mentioned this when I had you on my show a few weeks back. I think Rangers fans really overestimate how long these contending windows last in the NHL. It doesn't last 5-6 years a lot of times. I mean, teams that make the playoffs 15 years in a row or whatever are an aberration. Even then, for example, my Penguins, they weren't contending the last 5 years. So I think that's one. I think Edmonton's another because, quite frank, I mean, when you have the best player in the league and you have Leon Draisaitl scores 130 points, Nugent Hopkins had over 100 points as well. I mean, you got to eventually break through, at least make the Stanley Cup Finals. I mean, I know they made the conference finals this year, but that series was over before it even began. They just were not at the races there at all, with 2 players carried them all the way there. Another one, I think Tampa, because I think this is probably the last year before they lose a ton of players on their team. This is probably their last chance to really go deep unless they pull off some miracle in the offseason. But the most obvious and by far answer to this question for me is Toronto Maple Leafs. I mean, it's not even close. They have to get out of the first round. The talent they have, it's embarrassing that they haven't at this point. They're the most popular hockey team by far in the world. They have the biggest fan base. The Toronto media is absolutely nuts. They had the most pressure, and I don't even think it's close.
Interesting. I mean, right off the bat, you got to say Boston, right? Greatest regular season in history. You can't just buckle in the playoffs. And that's a team that they haven't been there in a while. So one, they're getting older too, as to Nova's point about, just in general, you're going to start losing players like Tampa. So that's one team. I think, I don't think the Rangers yet. I think I understand the offseason or the trade deadline moves with Tarasenko and Kane, but let's be honest. I mean, yes, there's always pressure when you're in New York, but they're still like this far behind the Atlantic, I think. So I'm still going to say Boston. Obviously, Toronto has to get it done. I think there's some pressure on Florida because of the moves they made in the offseason. They had to turn some roster over, but they still have to show up and get past the first round. And then probably out west, obviously there's some pressure on the Avs to repeat. Edmonton, to your point. Dallas, to an extent. I mean, Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin aren't getting any younger. I know they're second and third line players now. They're not top line guys, but this is probably their time to put up or shut up before some changes start happening. So
it's just me. I feel like Dallas and Minnesota play each other every year in the playoffs. Is it just me, or
that is just, no? Well, that's the form. They've played only once before, actually.
Right.
It feels like that happens a lot.
But it's the format.
Yes,
it's crazy.
I don't like it.
I hate the format.
I'm looking at. I'm gonna group some people here, right? I'm gonna group all the Canadian teams because I think anytime a team from Canada makes it, whether it's Edmonton, I think Winnipeg on a lesser level, like there's an expectation that you're going to go out and you're going to win. Toronto specifically, because they just continual meltdown. I think there's a lot of pressure on New York and Boston as well. And Vegas has some as well because they're coming up. A couple years ago, they lost to the Capitals, and then they had like a mini rebuild that they had to go through. to get back to being the number 1 seed. But by far, the team with the most pressure on them is Boston. You can't have the regular season they did, setting records, and then come in and choke out the first round. And I've seen it happen. I have seen Washington year after year come in, and you're looking at that Marchand, Bergeron, Krejci, like those guys have been there since, the early two. Yeah, right. Like
they were there.
They've only got one, which is
they were there for their last cup,
right?
Yeah.
So
well, how about
this is probably their last chance to really get that, because how many more years does that aging line got?
How about Carolina too? I mean, I understand they're not going to have Svechnikov, but that's a team that they went out and got Brent Burns, and they continue to make moves to get better and be there. And they had that not bad loss to the Rangers last year, but they were the proverbial favorites. Couldn't get past them, and now here we are again. It's deja vu. They have to get past the second round.
There are 14 that stand out to me. They've all been mentioned, but I just want to give my take here. Number one, the Boston Bruins. This it's been brought up, and this really might be their last run. And yes, they just signed Pastrnak. I get that, but there is a upper level group of this team, the core of the team, the foundation of the team outside of Pastrnak that's probably not going to be there next year. Bergeron almost retired last year. He came back. They've had a ridiculous regular season, and the last time we saw this kind of regular season, team got swept as soon as the playoffs started. So the pressure is everything you did from October to mid-April means jack if you don't do anything now. So a lot of pressure on Boston. I think there is an absolute metric ton of pressure on Toronto, because if you look at their cap situation, Austin Matthews is a UFA at the end of next season. So when you go into next season, are you going to get Tavares, or are you going to trade him? Because this might be legitimately the last run for this group.
Can you trade him?
You can absolutely. Well, again, it's not a matter of can. It's if he's not going to sign, is it malpractice to go with one last run? Because Nylander also is a pending free agent at the end of next year. And then Tavares and Marner the year after. So, this group's out of time. So this team hasn't gotten out of the first round in forever. I was still in college, and I'm 39. So, you kind of have to shit or get off the pot. Like if they fall in the first round this year, I mean, I don't know what you do. At that point, I think you get to fire everyone, because this is just not working.
You're
you can only get. You're
39.
I'm 39.
You look a day over 42, Brian.
Please get off my lawn while you're at it. I look at Edmonton, and I say, does McDavid really want to be there? Like, there's all this talk of, you can't build it. There's no goaltending. You can't build a defense around him. They got a couple of guys now, but it's taken them forever. Now, he's signed for 3 more years. But if the best player in hockey says, I want you to trade me, Edmonton's done that before, right? Mm-hmm. So they've been there and they've done that. If they can't get out of their own way, like if they can't make a deep run, McDavid might not want to be there anymore. And if you go down that road, I think it's hard to pull back from that. And then obviously I think it's the Rangers, because you go and you make these moves the way that you made them. 1 was expected, 2 was kind of surprising. But I look at the roster, and I don't know how long they'll be able to keep this roster together. You go into next season, you're again looking for 2 top 6 right wings if you're keeping your third line together. The salary cap's going to come due for everybody. Lafreniere needs a deal. Miller needs a deal. They got Hedl signed, which was good. But this group was put together to win now. Whether you think they can or they can't, they think they have a legit. You don't go out there and get a Tarasenko and get a Kane if you don't think you have a shot to win. And obviously, they do. So a ton of pressure on them. And I think that comes from what they did last year. And I think they're better than they were last year, significantly better than they were last year. So the perception is, if you're better, you should finish further. Did they overachieve last year? Yes, absolutely. That doesn't mean anything, though. If they get bounced in round 1, which is absolutely feasible, I don't know how you can't say it's a total disaster. Is it going to cost Drury's job? No. But that's one of the things where, how long can you really go with this group? So to me, those are the teams I think that are under the most pressure. Yeah, when you look,
the whole Eastern Conference, like I'm looking at it, it's like you got more teams than that
nuclear war
conference they're really going to be squeezing it out and trying to make it through. Like if a team from the Western Conference wins, I think it's going to be an upset.
Sure.
I mean, just the East, it's so many teams: Boston, Florida, Toronto, Tampa, Carolina, the Devils, the Rangers. Like all those teams could be disappointed easily.
Two of the Devils, the Rangers, the Lightning, and the Leafs are going to be out in round one.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that. And when you talk about the standings in the league, you're talking about the teams that finished third, fourth, eighth, or ninth, and then Tampa was a little bit lower or whatever. But these are very, very, very good teams. So when you look at the Eastern Conference, if you were a betting man, I happen to be one. If you were a betting man, would you take the Bruins or would you take the Field to come out of the Eastern Conference?
I'm taking the Field. I don't like that pressure of the regular season on them. I've seen it melt teams down. Like they have a good core that if there is one that's going to withstand it, it'd be them. But the Eastern Conference is a gauntlet right now.
Yeah, I think it has to be the Field simply because of how good the Atlantic is, and they have to play somebody from there, whether it's Toronto or Tampa. So
I'd say that. Oh, go
it
ahead.
has to be the Field just for that reason alone.
I'd probably say the Field as well. I mean, I think the Bruins, if they're firing all cylinders, they have a great chance. But I do have some question marks about the Bruins. I mean, I know they had a phenomenal season and whatnot, but obviously we've seen before. First of all, the President's Trophy curse. Second of all, you can have a record-breaking regular season. Means absolutely nothing in the playoffs once you're playing a 7-game playoff series. And, I will say this. Linus Ullmark had a phenomenal season, probably going to win the Vezina, and he deserves it. But this is a guy that for the most part of his career has been a backup. He's played only 2 playoff games, and they were last year. He went 0-2 and an .860 save percentage. This is by far the most pressure, he's going to have in his career. He's never played in games with this type of magnitude before, definitely not in the regular season, and obviously barely played in the playoffs. So that's something to consider. Then you think about teams, like the Hurricanes, the Rangers, the Devils. Not so much Toronto because I think the Bruins own Toronto. But if a team like Tampa, I know they had a little bit of a worse season this year, but they still have that playoff experience. Most of that core is still there. I'm not going to count them out in the playoffs as well. I just think that the Eastern Conference is too tough to where you can confidently say, yes, I'm all in on the Bruins to make the cup or win the cup. I just think there's too much competition for that.
I would take the Field. It is so hard. It is so hard to win this championship. And again, everybody's 0-0 now. Nobody cares. Nobody cares what you did in the regular season. And I'll tell you this, and I was thinking about this as I was driving around today. The way that the format is now, where it's 1 through 4, or like 1, 2, 3 and a wild card. Like when you look at a Boston, Florida, or a Vegas, Winnipeg, it doesn't, even though it is the 1-8, it doesn't feel like the 1-8. Like back in the day, like the 1-8, the 8 was fodder. Like they were never, rarely did you ever see that. Like I think that the way the format is now, whether it's psychological, you just view it that way, but because it's 1 and not 8, it's wild card 2, whatever you want to call it. It just feels like that upset can happen more often.
Yeah, it's not like
ones are not as invincible as they used to be.
And Florida had the best record last year. It's not
They
like
did.
they're a scrub team. Like they
Right.
had some struggles this year, but they still have, Matthew Tkachuk and some guys that
And who
have
was the
that
goalie?
experience.
And who was the goalie when the Blue Jackets swept the Lightning?
It's Bobrovsky, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't that Flyer?
I mean, if Florida beat the Bruins
Florida.
twice this year, it was only one of 2 teams that did
Bob's been there.
Mhm.
So Florida could easily pull off the upset in this first round.
I mean, Florida's way better than their record was. They just got off to a terrible start, but I will say it's really hot going in the playoffs, which you never count on a hot team.
Mm-hmm.
No, for sure. And we'll start there in the East, obviously, with the Atlantic Division matchup between the A1, the Atlantic 1 Boston Bruins. They are minus 320 to beat the second wild card, the Florida Panthers, who are plus 250. And, the last team from the Eastern Conference to win the President's Trophy and the Stanley Cup was the New York Rangers in 1994. And the only Boston doesn't have to look that far away to see the team that did this last year, because it was Florida who won the President's Trophy, ended up losing in the second round. So again, the best record sounds great, but it's a gift and a curse. And you look at Boston, 65, 12-5, 135 points in the regular season. they were wire to wire the best team in the NHL from a record perspective. And they didn't have a lot of pushback throughout the season. And to their credit, when they locked it all up, they kept playing their guys. They kept winning games. It wasn't as if they took their foot off the pedal, which they absolutely had every right to do so, and they didn't. The Panthers a year ago were the best team in the league, and they made very aggressive moves in this offseason, and it hasn't really worked out. Again, they are the 8 seed, if you will. So I will say this. I think Florida's a very live underdog in the series. Like, I don't think that you can look and say, well, they were the 8 seed, so this is going to be a 4-game, wipe the floor with them. Do I think Florida's going to win? No, but I do think, especially if they win game 1, that they can pierce that armor a bit. And I'd be curious to see if the Bruins, if they were to fall behind in the series, like what that would be portrayed at in the media, especially in a hockey hotbed like Boston, how it would feel, how it would look if they were to go down 0-1. I think they need game 1 more than Florida does for just, we're the big bad Bruins and we're still the team that was 65 wins. I look at it. I mean, the Panthers have a legitimate shot. I think that to say that they don't is not fair.
This one is interesting because, even though, record-breaking season, like we said, but I agree. I don't think this is, David versus Goliath or whatever. For example, like last year in the first round, Colorado played Nashville. Like, everyone knew Colorado was probably going to sweep that series. I just don't get that feeling in the Panthers. First of all, I think they're way better than their record shows. I don't like their coach. I think they made a mistake firing Brunette and bringing in Maurice. I mean, Maurice missed the playoffs with the Jets last year, and what he leaves, and they're in the playoffs again this year. And they lost about 30 points or whatever this year. But, I mean, they still got Kachuk. He's an animal. Obviously, Barkov is a really good player. Carter Verhaeghe scored like 42 goals this year, which is one of the most underrated seasons of the year. Mm-hmm. I'm just interested to see what Bobrovsky does because, the thing with him in the past has always been, playoff struggles or whatnot. He needs to have a good series in this one. And the other side, like I said, once again, Linus Ullmark, great regular season, but this isn't a guy with any playoff experience. This is going to be the most pressure he's ever going to be under in his career. How is he going to deal with that? Obviously, the team is absolutely loaded, so I will still take Boston. But it's not like a series where we typically expect, if it's a Colorado or a Tampa Bay a few years ago, where you'd expect them to just easily sweep the first round or something like that. I think Boston wins this, but it's going to be close. I'm going to go Boston in 6 games.
I agree. I think it's Boston in 6. So you look at some of the additions they made during the trade deadline, bringing in Dmitry Orlov, who's been a top pair guy for him, bringing in a guy like Garnet Hathaway, who is a tough grinder. I mean, they're stacked top to bottom. I think Florida, a little bit younger core, is going to be able to give them a run in a couple of the games. But ultimately, I think it's going to be Boston in 6.
Yeah, I think Boston wins this in 5. I don't know if Brian, if you remember, but do you know who I wanted as coach of the Flyers?
I mean, plenty of guys that didn't get hired there.
Jim Montgomery.
That's true. Yeah,
and I've been saying that since before he left the Blues. But he's been there. He has the experience when they went to the Cup. I think it's just a different mentality, a different Boston team. I think they're going to take care of business. I do think Florida will steal one and kind of get in Boston's head a little bit, but they're experienced enough. They have the veterans. Florida will punch them in the mouth early on, and that might, get them on their toes a little bit, Boston. But they're just a better team, better defense, better goalie. They can score at will. So it's going to be tough, anybody going up against the Bruins in these playoffs.
I'll be curious. So Boston a year ago, they played Carolina in round 1. Home team won every game. So again,
different mentality, I think.
It is. I would love to see Florida win the first game just to see what happens.
Yes,
I just have a big curiosity about that because again, you lost in the first round last year. You weren't supposed to. Well, maybe you were, but you still should have been a tighter series. And it went 7, right? But it's just like when you were at home, you were dominant. When you were on the road, you were terrible, and that's where it ended. I think Boston finds a way, right? They're the favorites for a reason. I wouldn't hate sprinkling Florida. And I wouldn't hate sprinkling Florida, even if you want to take like Florida plus a game and a half because I don't think this is a short series. I think Florida has enough firepower to stay with them. Defensively, they got worse than last year, no question about it. Like, I mean, that deal where Uyghur went to Calgary, I think was a big difference. So, again, Dan Holloway, injuries can make a difference, change a series quick. That's true. But I mean, Boston's deep. Again, if one guy goes down, that's not going to derail anything. I also like Boston. I think it's going to take 6. I don't think it takes 7. I think if Boston goes 3-2 to Florida, it's over. Like, I think at that point to put your foot on the Tiger's neck, pardon the pun. But yeah, no, I do think Boston finds a way at least in the
But could you imagine the irony if Florida does upset them?
That would be fantastic.
Go from President's Trophy to wild card beating the
and then you take down the team that won it this year.
Yeah.
So I mean, look, there's a reason these teams don't win. Now, like I said, to Boston's credit, they didn't take their foot off the gas. I respected that. I thought that they would, and I thought that they should, but they really didn't. A tighter series in the Atlantic is going to be the second-seeded Toronto Maple Leafs at minus 155 to beat the third-seeded Tampa Bay Lightning at plus 135.
This is teams that play every year.
Yes, this is the matchup that we saw last year that the Lightning took in 7 games. The Maple Leafs have not won in the first round since 2004. That was my sophomore year of college.
Yeah, I was in 8th grade.
I'm old now. Okay. When you look at these teams, again, as we said, you don't know how many more years you have with this core in Toronto. The salary cap, I don't know how they've managed it. They've done a decent job of it, but their 4 stars are only signed for a little while here, with 2 of them done at the end of next season. Tampa Bay, on the other hand, they still have the core of a back-to-back champion and a back-to-back-to-back finals participant, if you will. Plus, they have Andrei Vasilevsky in goal. And I look at series and I say, who can be a difference maker? Who can be a goalie that can take the thing over? Tampa's got one of them. Toronto doesn't. Toronto has had a goaltending since probably Curtis Joseph. Nobody else stands out
for.
And
it's the last time they won.
All I'm saying is, you want to talk about live underdogs? Tampa Bay is a very, very live dog. And again, we talk about game 1. If Tampa goes into Toronto and takes the first game in that media market, it is going to be like a pressure cooker more than it has ever been. And every single time it's been a pressure cooker, this team has folded like a cheap suit. Toronto probably needs game 1 more than any team in the league in the playoffs, because if it doesn't go their way, woe is me. It's happening again. And then the house starts to crumble.
Well, let me ask you this.
Go ahead.
I get it. It's Toronto, and the pressure is always as high as it can possibly be. But is there really pressure? Because they've lost every year. They're just expecting it at this point, I would think. I'm going into this, like, if they win, awesome. If they don't, well, I just go back to doing what I was doing right before the season started. Because it's the same thing every year with Toronto. Is there really pressure at this point?
I think there is, though, because the other times it's okay, we'll do it next year. We still got our core 4 guys. That runway is ending quickly.
I know.
Austin Matthews might just end up in Arizona.
Yeah.
Well, my Ranger
they
fans.
Would be a powerhouse.
I love my Ranger fans. Kelly, how are you?
I don't.
I know.
I think they stink.
I know. Okay, fine.
Man, no, this is a good. This is one of the 2 Eastern Conference matchups that hurt me because, hey, Washington had this goalie on their roster last year, and when you look at the stats between Vasilevsky and Ilya Samsonov actually beats him in both goals against average and save percentage, because, quite frankly, the cap space got too tight to keep Ryan McDonough and other defenders that they had in Tampa Bay, and I think that's going to be the big difference, right? The defensive depth that Tampa Bay has is not what they've had previously. This isn't the same Lightning team that we've seen the last few years take over. And this Toronto team, I think, is poised for a deeper run. I think they're going to win. I have it in 5. But when you're looking at the Maple Leafs, I think they're going to come in hungry, and they're younger. Tampa Bay looked worn down as the season went along. It's like that age and the injury history just sort of caught up with them. And Toronto, I think, is going to come in. They're going to punch Tampa in the mouth, and they're going to take it right away.
Oh man,
They did
I
that
think
last year.
I think this is a real coin flip series for me. First of all, I think the main advantage Tampa has obviously is Vasilevsky. You know, Samsonov did have a good regular season this year, but we all know what Vassy can do when it comes to playoffs. He's one of the best playoff goalies of all time. But and obviously, you know, Toronto didn't exactly have a proven goalie last year, and they still took it to 7, and they just couldn't score in Game 7. I mean, I think it was 2-0 or something like that. But I will say this: I think there's really one thing that I think could make this Leafs team different from last year. It's not any other top guys. I mean, you know, obviously I like Matthews, Marner, all of them, Nylander, Tavares, all point per game or above players. But I think one guy that they traded for this year has everything the Leafs had always lacked. He has playoff experience. He's a clutch player. He's good defensively, and he wins faceoffs. Ryan O'Reilly changes everything about this Maple Leafs team for me, in my opinion. Tampa Bay's defense is a little more inexperienced with no Ryan McDonough, you know, playing guys like Perbix this year. They lost Platt in the offseason. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to count out guys like Stamkos, Point, Kucherov. But I think O'Reilly gives this Maple Leafs team pretty much everything they've been lacking in all these playoff chokes. So, in my opinion, very close series. But I'm going for it. If I get laughed at and they choke again, whatever. Toronto in 7. They're going to get past the first round for the first time since I was 5 years old. That tells you how long ago it was.
It's my son's age. That blows my mind.
Oh, nice.
Dan, there's no cap in the playoffs. You can do whatever you want to, which is great for Tampa Bay because Tampa Bay loves that because they abuse the cap every year. Someone should probably fix that hole or anything.
I'm going back to the I take Toronto every year, so fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on me. Sorry, other way around. Fool me once, shame on me. Shame on me. So I can't take Toronto. I just can't. They've let me down so many times. I think Toronto comes out, kicks them in the teeth early, and then they're just going to, like to Brian's point earlier, they're going to fold like a cheap tent. Tampa in 6. There's no substitute for the playoff experience that they bring.
I just think this line's begging you to take Toronto, which is why I think it goes the other way. Because you look at it and you say, Tampa Bay's on the way down. Well, Tampa Bay still got their core, still got their goaltender. Yeah, the ancillary pieces change every year. It hasn't mattered.
They talk about it every year. Put up or shut up. Let's go.
The cases you all have made for me for Toronto are the cases you made last year and the year before and the year before and the year before. Last year's Ryan O'Reilly was Mark Giordano. Like everybody, you always have this guy that comes in, veteran guy. George Morton was there, wasn't he? I think at one point, like Marlowe wasn't he?
Brian, Mark Giordano doesn't have a Conn Smythe trophy. I don't think that's a fair comparison.
I understand that, but if you put Brian Leach on their blue, and it probably doesn't help them now either. Because he's a little older, right? Again, I like Ryan O'Reilly a lot, and I think that he will help them a lot. Like, I don't think Tampa's going to run away with this, but like I said, I'm telling you right now, if Tampa wins Game 1, you know what it's going to be. You know what that city's going to be like. And the other thing too, if they do win the series, and the monkey's finally off their back, are they then fodder for Boston? Because that's like, oh, we got past round 1, we're great. Like, it's just one of those things where, like, this team should have got past this point a bunch of times and didn't. So I'm going to go on the side of history and say Tampa knows how to win this series and Toronto doesn't.
Trend.
The trend is your friend until it's not.
You always go with the trend, right?
So I like the plus 135.
But streaks are also meant to be broken, Brian. Keep that in mind.
They are. Usually they're streaks of, like, you're good for a while and then it goes the other way. Like the Capitals and the Penguins who make the playoffs.
Yeah.
Usually it's not, I'm
always going to bet the trend, though. The streak happens once, the trend happens over and over and over.
Yeah. Me personally, I feel more comfortable with Vasilevsky than I do with whoever the hell's playing goal in Toronto.
Yep.
And I think it makes a big difference to me. Going over to the Metropolitan side of things, we look at the 1-seeded Carolina Hurricanes. They're a minus 205 to take down the number 1 wild card team, the New York Islanders, who are plus 165. These two teams faced off in 2019. That was a sweep at the hands of the Hurricanes because Long Island was damaged by some severe weather. When you look at things from the Hurricane side of things, yes, they are missing Andrei Svechnikov, and that is a massive, massive problem. Carolina, however, one of the best defensive teams in the league. Not only do they take the most shots on goal, they also suppress the most shots the other way. So while it's true that the Islanders, who are here because Pittsburgh allowed them to be here, number one, and on the shoulders of Ilya Sorokin, who is absolutely fantastic as a goaltender, and let no one tell you differently. This is an interesting series here. Pains me to say it because I hate them. The Islanders are a very, very live underdog in this series, specifically because of Ilya Sorokin. You look at a goaltender who can take over a series, he can do that. And because Carolina's hobbled as far as their offense goes, he may not need to be tippy top. Look, Aho is fantastic, but they were a 1-2 punch. Nietzsche is, look, they're a very good team, right? From a Rangers fan perspective, I would have preferred to play them than the Devils. And I think it's because, again, their offense is just missing their guy. I think it was Brad Brindamore was asked, like, who was the best Hurricanes player? And he said, in a couple of years, it's going to be Svechnikov, like, of all time. Mm-hmm. Like, that's how good he is. To miss him in this series, that might be the difference in the series. I'll probably still pick Carolina to win it. I don't love it, though. Like, I wouldn't bet this. Like, I think... I mean, I don't know. I guess there's some other series in the West that are closer than this. I think the -205 for Carolina is a bit rich.
I don't know what Carolina's a team I always go back and forth on. Like, obviously, I think they're a very good team, but they're not one of those teams I look at and, I'm willing to bet my house on them or anything like that. They don't have that appeal that, teams like a Tampa or Colorado have had in the past few years, even though, they're always, contending for winning their division. But, we saw last year, Brian, the Rangers, were a lower seed when they played the Hurricanes, and the Rangers were able to beat them. I think the thing with the Islanders, they have the greatest equalizer, which is an elite goalie, Ilya Sorokin. In my opinion, I mean, just looking statistically, save percentage, goals saved above average, goals against average, he was the second best goalie in the whole league this year. The only guy I think you put above him was Ullmark, and that's because Ullmark had one of the greatest seasons a goalie's probably ever had. But Sorokin is an absolute animal. The only reason I wouldn't feel confident about the Islanders is I think their offense is very one-dimensional. I know Barzal, was skating recently, but he is still, lingering injured, what have you. And other than Barzal and Brock Nelson, I do like him. He had like 75 points this year, 30-plus goals, made the All-Star game. But once you get past those two guys, it drops off quite a bit. Anders Lee, I think, had 50 points this year. Then it drops off even further to guys like, I think, Pajot had 40. And then it just goes down from there. I just don't think they have the offense against a team like Carolina who has such a good defense. Okay, I don't trust either of their goalies, obviously. Frederik Andersen's playoff history speaks for itself. But they do have the defense to limit shots. And while I don't think they'll go too deep in the playoffs because I think other than Aho and Netchus, I don't really like their offense as much as the record should show. I think for a team like the Islanders that doesn't really have a lot of offense either, I think they'll be able to win it. Will it be closer than most people might think? Yes, but I still think Carolina will win it. Probably, and if they play really great, I think they can win it in 5. But to be more conservative, I'll go Carolina in 6.
And you and I both agree the moment it happened that the Bo Horvat trade was a disaster for the Islanders, which they then doubled down on with the contract.
Yeah.
Let me tell you how much of a disaster it was. In 49 games in Vancouver, Bo Horvat had 31 goals and 23 assists. In 30 games on Long Island, 7 goals and 9 assists. So his breakout season, because he never had more than 31 goals in his career, which was only last year, thud when it got to Long Island.
Yeah,
I thought I don't know what to make. I was not a fan of that deal.
By the way, I've had Natchez as my super keeper, and of course he this is the year he breaks out after he's done being my keeper. But anyway, the Islanders are playing with house money. They shouldn't have been there, as we talked about earlier. They're going to give the Hurricanes everything that they can handle. They know each other. It's not they're in-division rivals, so they've played each other plenty of times throughout the year. I think I'm going to give the edge to the goaltending here, as we've alluded to. I think the Islanders are going to take this one in 7 in Carolina. Carolina folds, in home game 7s. So give me the Islanders. I'm going to roll the dice on them because they have nothing to lose.
This is a hard one. Because you got the Canes, who are probably the more skilled team, and then you have the Islanders, who are just that blue collar, gritty. I mean, it's how we describe them every year, right? When Trotz was there, they're just a gritty team. They've got the better goaltender, but I like the defensive talent that Carolina brings. Definitely losing Svechnikov and not having a veteran presence like Max Pacioretty definitely hurts. But I like that talent that they have down there. I think their blue liners are going to carry it. I think you'll see at least 3 or 4 of them get on the goal scoring sheet before the series is over. I like Carolina in 6.
And by the way, Brian, I've said this for years now. I think Carolina's very top heavy, and you see one star goes down, and what happens? I mean, that's a big problem for them.
I will say this
is scoring.
Yeah, no, I will say this. I think if Trotz was still in on the Islanders as their coach,
it'd be a bigger problem. Yes.
Like I just feel though I think Rod Brind'Amour is a phenomenal head coach. Like of all the teams in the league, like I just think that their system works best. Like those players they're bought in. Like that's what they do, and they probably have too many ex-Rangers on their team. I think that's a problem. But again, like I look at this and I think the -205 is a misnomer. Like I think it's a lot tighter than that. I do think Carolina finds a way. But if you told me the Islanders won this thing, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Like, I just think that it's a high number. If I was betting it, I would take the +165 on the Islanders because I think that that's where the value is. The Islanders can absolutely win this series. They're a very live underdog. And again, but the funny thing about this, guys, again, we talk about it's not the 1.827. This is a 2.7. Yeah. It doesn't feel like a 2.7. And I don't know if it's like psychological or what it is, but that's what it is. This is the 2-7 matchup in the East. And more times than not, a 2-7, Carolina in 5. Easy. Like you don't even think about it. But Sorokin, look, Sorokin, if he is on, they can absolutely beat the Carolina Hurricanes. Without Svechnikov especially. Like I really think that he's that big of a loss for them as they go through here.
Yeah, in the playoffs, you see teams with more talent and more speed lose out to those gritty teams because it's a 1-by-1 game. It's not like you have more time to prepare and more time to plan and to shut down. I mean, I've seen it year after year watching Washington when they had the high-scoring offense with Bruce Boudreau. They do great in the regular season. They get into the postseason. It's hard to score when people can specifically plan. And the rink shrinks. It just does in the playoffs.
No, you're absolutely right. The other matchup in the Metro is the 2-seeded New Jersey Devils at -120, taking on the 3-seed New York Rangers at +100 even money in the series. This is the first matchup for the Hudson River rivalry since the 2012 Eastern Conference Finals. The Devils took that in 6 games. The Devils have not won a round since that matchup in 2012. They have not made the playoff. They made the playoffs once and lost to Tampa. When you look at this from a Devils perspective, massive 63 points to 112. Okay. 52, 22, and 8. Great. A year ahead of schedule by any metric you wish to choose. And this probably means they're going to be good for a while. They've been drafting high. They have high picks, the top 5 picks that are just finding their way into the roster now. So the Devils are set up to be good for a while. So are the Rangers, although the top end of that core is getting a little bit older, and they added to that, as everybody knows, by bringing in Vladimir Tarasenko and bringing in Patrick Kane. Being that I am the only one of us with a team in the playoffs, and this is my team, I will let you ask me questions because I feel as though you may have questions, or if you'd like to pass, that's fine. But if you have something you'd like to ask me, go ahead.
What scares you the most about this round?
I see a lot of last year's Rangers in these Devils. Not so much that they're playing with house money. I know somebody had said that. But, when you look at it, could the stage be too big for the Devils? Yes. Could they not care? Yes. And I think that would be what I would fear the most from them. The Rangers played them well in the regular season. The Devils did win 3 out of 4. The Rangers got 1 in overtime. It's a talented team, But you want to talk about top-heavy teams? Like, I think they're a top-heavy team. Like, I think that the best individual in the series is Jack Hughes. You have to be afraid of Jack Hughes. Phenomenal player. But I don't know after that. Like, I think if he's not a star, this could be a short series the other way.
I will say, historically, Lindy Ruff's teams have not performed well in the playoffs, right? But the Devils are very good. They have a lot of high-end talent, offensively and defensively. They've arrived. They're here. Like, this is their announcement to the world. Like, hey, look, we're a bona fide NHL team ready to contend. Could the goaltending be better? Yes. I was always a Mackenzie Blackwood fan, especially coming out of the draft that year. So I don't see it hampering them that much. This is as even of a match round or a series as I think there is in the playoffs in the first round. And I think it really is going to come down to who has home ice in the seventh game.
The Rangers have home ice in every game.
I know you said that, yeah. They're so close in New York.
But they do.
Right. But I also think there's a part of the NHL that wants the Devils to be good. And
there's 12 people on the planet who want the Devils to be good.
Get Jack Hughes the exposure that he deserves. I'm not saying it's fixed, but
like the draft lottery.
Right, exactly like the draft lottery. Let's get the Rangers and the Devils good again.
Which line do you think of the Rangers is got to be the X factor for y'all to make it through to the next round?
1,000% the third line. Because for the most part, I do think the top two lines on each team kind of cancel each other out. Mm-hmm. I think the Rangers have the most talented third line in hockey. I don't think it's close. You literally have a first overall pick, a second overall pick, and a 21st overall pick taken a year early who would have been a top 5 pick the next year. And they have been phenomenal the last 20 games or so.
And the best player is Hedl of the group.
That he's also the oldest one. That does happen. This is Hedl's breakout year, and he signed a contract. They defensively sound. To me, that's going to be the difference in the series. Well, one of two things. I'm going to pick the Rangers to win. I'm sure you probably knew that already, but there's a reason for that. That's going to be the difference in the series because the Devils can probably do a decent job of defending the top two lines. They're not a very deep defensive core at all, right? So you're going to get favorable matchups if you're Lafreniere, Kakko, and Hedl, and I think that I frankly expect that line to score a goal a game in the series. I don't see why they wouldn't. And the Devils defensively don't scare me. And we were just talking about, I think we were talking about Carolina versus the Islanders. It was like this super skill team versus like this defensively sound team with good goaltending, really good goaltending. And we talk about every year how Toronto has this top end talent and they're just going to skate around and score goals. Is that the third? And they don't have any goaltending and they can't defend for shit. And I look at this and I say, yeah, the Devils play a very good brand of regular season hockey. They do. Very good brand of regular season hockey. That may or may not translate to postseason hockey. And a lot's been made about, the Rangers, they're, Kane's older, got a hip problem. Since Jacob Trouba threw his helmet on December 3rd, the Rangers were the second best team in the league, behind only Boston. So had they just been that Ranger team the whole year, that was a 119-point team. What I would ask the three of you is, tell me what the hole is on the Rangers roster. Because I don't see one. Do I have blue-colored glasses? Maybe a little bit. But objectively as I can be, I don't see a hole on the roster.
I wouldn't say a hole, but looking at Shesterkin, he definitely wasn't as sturdy this year as he was last year. I mean, of course, it's going to be hard to repeat those numbers, but he was a little bit more leaky this year. Like, does it cause you any concern? I mean, even in interviews, he admitted that there were parts this year that he just was just outright bad.
They were 11, 10, and 5 to start. They were as average could be. They were not good. And there was a lot of concern. And we said Kane was going to be a Ranger the whole year. I said to you, they may make the playoffs. That's how bad they were. And then they got a wake-up call. Shesterkin in the last 20 games, he's been himself.
Yeah. Or Shesterkin just knew that you were concerned that him winning the Vezina would cost more money. So he's like, well, if I suck the first 20 games, maybe it's going to bring the value back down.
Yes, I appreciate that.
You are more bullish than I am on their defense. And now, granted, you watch them every night. However, defensively, and I know they didn't give up a ton of shots per game and whatnot, and you got Igor to clean up any loose ends or tie up any loose ends, but they're still fairly young, and I know the Devils are too, but I'm going to take the skill of the Devils over the youth of the Rangers defense.
Who's the best defenseman in the series?
Fox.
Okay. Who's the second best defenseman in the series?
Dougie.
Is he?
Yeah, he had over 70 points this year. Absolutely.
No. Dougie Hamilton is a great offensive defenseman.
So is Fox, and that
he is. Fox plays the two-way game though, and that's the difference. There's a reason Hamilton's been around the block. Hamilton puts up. You know who Hamilton is? A poor man's Erik Karlsson.
Brent Burns.
I just still can't. We haven't even mentioned Timo Meier though. Like that was a great pickup at the deadline to add some more.
Lindy Ruff's teams do play sound defensively though.
Has struggled to integrate. We talk about goalies who could take over a series.
Yeah, the advantage there is obviously for the Rangers.
I look at it. I don't think there's a whole. Again, if you are of the belief that the Rangers can make a very deep run to the playoffs, you don't fear this Devils team. If they lose I think the longer the series goes, the better it is for the Rangers, because I think if it goes like 5, that just means that the Devils' speed, they had no answer for it, and the Rangers just fold.
That's my concern.
Again, I agree with you to a point. That's not the playoffs. That's not postseason hockey. It hasn't been in a very long time, which is why teams like Toronto fail. Why those teams like Tampa Bay that won 62 games failed? Because they didn't play defense. They were just pretty. The NHL playoffs are not pretty.
Boston's always been, a tough in your face team. And
let me ask you, who are the Devils' heavy players? Who are their gritty players?
They don't really have any.
They don't.
Well, this is another series I think is a coin flip for me. I think up front, top players, top 6, and what have you, top 2. I think the teams are mostly even. I mean, you have Hughes, you have Meier. Granted, like you said, Meier has struggled to adapt, but let's be honest, we all know what he can do when he's firing on cylinders.
It's just been tough. Yeah.
And I love Jesper Bratt as well. I think he's a very under the radar player. And the Rangers top 6 is great as well. Again, Brian, I mean, you can say what you want. You can say what you want about Hamilton. You say poor man's Erik Karlsson like that's a bad thing, which I don't think that's a bad. It's
not a bad thing offensively. Great kind of player. But yeah. I don't know that they have defensive defensemen.
I agree, and those are areas I think the Rangers have an advantage. I think they have better depth in the forward core. I mean, I'm not a fan of Trouba. I mean, I've made that obvious, but I do like what Miller's doing. He's developing well. I think, Adam Fox is a great player, but I don't think anything with skaters-wise is really going to determine the series. I think what's going to determine the series is the fact that you have a guy in Vitek Vanacek going up against Shesterkin, and we all know what Shesterkin can do when he's firing on all cylinders. And I like Vanacek, but let's be honest, he's an inexperienced goalie. This is a team that I really don't know what to think about because they gained 49 points in the previous year or whatever. They're a relatively playoff unknown, which could work in their favor. But in my opinion, I'm going to err on the side of caution and go against a team that I think has more depth, I think has an advantage in goal, and I like their defense a little bit better. I do think this is a close series. I would not be surprised. First of all, I think no matter who wins the series, I think it's going 6 or 7. I think people that say either team wins in 5 are being very optimistic either way. But I'm going to go with the Rangers in 6 just because I like their team a little bit more experienced, more proven. I think the Devils are, first of all, a phenomenal team. And the way they've been drafted lately, they're going to be here for a while. This is not, in my opinion, going to be a one-off where they just instantly come out of nowhere and then they're nowhere again. I think they'll be here to stay. But for their first year back in the playoffs, I think a team like the Rangers, I think they're better than the record show. They got off to a terrible start. Like Brian said, the second half of the season, they're one of the best teams in the league. So give me the Rangers in 6 in this one.
Brian, who are the Rangers' tough guys, by the way?
Would you believe me if I told you Tarasenko plays a heavy game? You wouldn't know that if you don't watch it. Would you believe me if I
knew
told you
that, but
would you believe me if I told you that Kakko and Lafreniere could shocking play a grinding? Patrick Kane's like guys who get drafted high don't really play that kind of grinding style. The Devils don't have anybody like a Trouba, like him or not, who can literally knock you out of the game. Trouba, I've heard Devils fans say he reminds them a lot of Scott Stevens. In that it's a clean hit and you don't get up. And it causes whatever it causes. You would think, let me ask you a question.
Okay, so I'm not afraid of any of the guys you mentioned so far, except for maybe Trouba. Good.
The Devils have all this talent on their power play. They have guys like Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, Dougie Hamilton, Timo Meier.
Hischier plays in your face, by the way.
Where was their power play ranked?
I don't know. Where was it? Not
good. Like outside the top 10? The difference in the series is going to come down to the goaltending is going to be the big difference.
Special teams.
The special team. I expect the Rangers power play to be the Rangers power play. If it's not, it's issues. No question about it. I think if it's, the Rangers power play was on par with Colorado's. So, it is a weapon and it is deep. Like that's the thing. When I say the Rangers don't have a hole, I don't know if there's anybody in their starting roster you'd really like. I need to get rid of that guy. Even Nico Mikkola, who was thrust into a top pairing role because of Ryan Lindgren's injury, he's played great, better than I ever thought he was going to play. And you haven't really seen this Ranger team as a fully functional Death Star because as soon as Kane showed up, then Lindgren got hurt, and Lindgren makes a massive difference on this team. So here's what I'll tell you. I think the Rangers win this in 6 games. I think if it gets 2-2 to New York for if it gets 3-1 Rangers, the Devils win game 5, the Rangers win game 6. If the Rangers have a chance to put them away at home, they win it in 6. If the Devils have a chance to beat the Rangers in 6, the Rangers win the next 2 games. I think the Rangers win at home, and I'm going to take Igor in a 1-game playoff against an inexperienced goaltender. So I don't after that, but I will say I am more confident that they beat the Devils than I was last year that they would have beaten the Penguins. And the Devils are way better than the Penguins were, and the Rangers are way better than they were last year.
How much stock are you putting in pressure, though? Because I think coming into the series, no one expected the Devils to be here. Yet they were 1 game off from being they were 1 point off from being the 1 seed over Carolina. It was just 1 overtime loss was the difference. And the fact that the Rangers went 1-3 this year against, or 1-2-1 against the Devils, like how much does that pressure do 100%. You think build up?
There is no pressure on the Devils. 1, because nobody cares about the Devils, but 2, because they weren't expected to be here. Okay. The Rangers have pushed their chips into the middle. The Rangers Chris Ray realized that, again, the cap's going to cause some issues. Are they dead next year? Absolutely not. But your top end guys are getting older. So strike while the iron's hot. They built this team to go into the playoffs and make some noise. So much is made of, you haven't seen the best of Patrick Kane. And Gallant said it.
This is his time.
We didn't bring in Patrick Kane for the last 2 games of the regular season.
This is his stage.
Direct quote. Yep. The Rangers have guys that have been there and done that before. The Devils do not, for the most part. Other than Andre Palat, not concerned. To me, either the Rangers are going to win this series or the Rangers are going to lose this series. I don't think it's anything the Devils are going to do. Either they're going to, be a bit of a fraud, that they revert back to the team they were and they just can't get out of their own way, or they win the series in 6 games.
I also think they'll either win or lose the series.
No, what I mean is it's nothing the Devils are.
I know what you meant.
They're going to. The Rangers will control if they win or lose. If they play 3 periods, which they haven't done, because the regular season hasn't mattered for them in a very long time, I think they win this in 6. And
they should.
It's exactly what
should. They're a better team.
Win in 5 or 6.
Right, they're a better team. They should. I'm also going to take the Rangers in 6. But if you see the Devils start flying around out there and nobody's doing anything about it, it's going to be a long series.
It'll be a short series. Actually,
that's what I meant. Long series for as a Rangers fan. Right,
I agree with you. Again, to me, if it's short, it's a Devils win. And that's the thing.
Yep.
My actual real concern is that every year I say you really can't play 7 games in the first 2 rounds and expect to go win because it just drains you. They need to win this in 6. They need to win in 6 or less. I think if you get on this thing again where it's 7 games, But here's the other thing too. Again, I'm really not piling on Noah because I love Noah. But what I'm saying is, the Rangers have seen their own death and come back from it a bunch of times. Like if the Devils are down 3-1, they're done. Right? Like the Rangers were down in a hole to Pittsburgh, probably the deepest hole I've ever. They allowed 14 goals in 2 games on the road. Right? They found a way out of that. So it's like the no quit in New York thing. It's not just a hashtag. But for whatever reason, they like to make it harder on themselves for some reason. I want to see Tarasenko and Kane in the playoffs. And I think you're going to see – let's see what the tone is set very early on. In this series, I don't know that either team needs game 1 to win. Like other series, I think it can change things. If the Devils win game 1, I'm not concerned. If the Rangers win game 1, I wouldn't be concerned about New Jersey. But I think it's how that game is played. Because if you see a different game than you saw in the regular season, if you don't see the Devils skating around with their speed because the playoffs are tighter, and if they don't adjust to that, I think the Rangers can take it. Frankly,
Brian, I got one last question for you before we move on.
Go right ahead.
You love to mention the fully operational Death Star. What happened to both of the Death Stars?
There's no Jedi coming on the Jersey side of things. Maybe eventually. Listen, I think what they're going to do, if they can keep this team together, I think they can be very good. When we talk about teams like where we said the haves and have-nots in the East and Metro, like these top 3 teams, I think are going nowhere for a while. So, like, again, we'll get into it in the offseason. I want to get in this. The Penguins should go into rebuild. The Caps should go into rebuild. The Flyers are finally, after a decade, going into rebuild because they're not on the level of these 3 teams.
Yeah.
So, whatever you're going to maybe make a cosmetic appearance and get knocked out. So, like, what are you really doing? There is a gap. There is the top 3 and everybody else. So that's why I would say that's the case. Like you're going to have the same conversation in 12 months.
So crazy to me. The three in the Atlantic compared to the 3 in the Metro. I mean, to me, it would be the 3 in the Atlantic, a huge drop off, and then the 3 in the East or the Metro.
To me, in my heart of hearts, and you can put me into a lie detector test, I think the Rangers are the second best team in the Eastern Conference.
Oh boy.
Because I don't see a hole. I can see many holes on these other teams. Devils have no goaltending. They have no experience. Toronto has no goaltending. Tampa's getting older. We'll get to my picks for the conference finals here. You might probably can know where I'm going with this, but
I'm going to keep my comments to myself.
Goaltending changes everything. You wouldn't know that, Ant.
That's some blue shaded lenses right there.
Yeah, a little bit.
Tell me what their hole is. That's all I ask.
Red face and blue shaded red.
Tell me what their hole is.
Or blue lenses.
Tell me who to replace. Who don't you like?
The funny thing is I have to go through this with my other sports teams, but I'm always with the.
Do you not like their top 6?
It's good.
Do you not like their third line?
It's good.
Do you not like their fourth line?
But I compare it to like the teams in the Atlantic. And I'm like, whoa.
Who was on Toronto's third line?
Bunch of Boston's third line. They're so good. The first 2 that it really doesn't matter. It's a bunch of defensive-minded forwards.
Talent perspective, top to bottom, I think. Again, Boston's very good. Obviously,
yeah.
I'll take my chances. Anyway,
right.
I think I've said enough there. Let's talk about the other side of the coin, right? The Western Conference. Is it finally the year that Connor McDavid leads his team with very little defense and no goaltending to the Stanley Cup Finals?
Yes.
And at the same time, I feel as though everyone's talking about the Oilers in the West, and nobody's talking about the defending Stanley Cup champion Colorado Avalanche. So
as they should.
But my 2-part question to you is it McDavid's year to go to make a finals run? And are the Avalanche getting disrespected?
No, the Oilers are not making the finals because they have no goaltending. I mean, I like Skinner, but let's be honest, there's no CV on Skinner. And their defense, look, I love the Ekholm trade. I think that's really good for them. Defensive first defenseman, but I still don't look at their defense with a lot of confidence. Now, I will say this about the Oilers. They're the hottest team in the league since January. They're right there with the Oilers pretty much. They've been incredible. Ever since they got Ekholm, there's something like 12-0-1 or something ridiculous. I don't remember the exact record. They're going in the playoffs hot. But at the same time, the West, I think there's still some really good teams. I like Vegas, but the main thing is Colorado, right? I do think they're getting slightly disrespected. Now, they had a great season still, 109 points or whatnot, but for a team that before the season, pretty much everyone that I knew at least was saying this team can repeat as Stanley Cup champions, this team will win the President's Trophy, blah, blah, blah. First of all, they had a ton of injuries, and they still got 109 points. They won their division, which is very competitive. I think Colorado, this is kind of the same logic I always use as Tampa. People would always write off Tampa, especially last year. A lot of people had Tampa losing Toronto. They still go to the Stanley Cup Finals. Until I see a team beat Colorado, Colorado's the favorite in the West. You have to knock off the best to be the best. I don't think Edmonton's a better team than Colorado. Okay, they got McDavid and Draisaitl, great. I love Nugent Hopkins. But even without Landeskog, you still got McKinnon, Rantanen. I know Makar's got a little stinger, but he should be good to go. Their depth is excellent. Definitely, in my opinion, way better than the Oilers. And their defense is way better. And, Georgiev has been great this season. His goal saved above average is top level in the league. It's not just the fact he's on a good team. He's actually been really good this year. So I don't think – I think they can go to the conference finals again. I don't think they're good enough to beat a team like Colorado. I still think they have too many holes.
Yeah, I think you're right. They are the favorite. Literally the favorite, Colorado, and they're banged up. So I don't know if they had enough time to kind of gel here at the end, whereas Edmonton had all the time in the world. I loved the Ekholm trade.
Mm-hmm.
They gave up Tyson Barrie and like a prospect or something.
Yeah,
they didn't give up much, but that's just has made all the world's difference there. I don't think Colorado's goaltending is that great either, but I think that's. Edmonton is hot. Edmonton's got the best players in the world in Draisaitl and McDavid. And I don't know how – I know they did it last year, but I don't know how Colorado's defense not as good as they were last year. I don't know how they're going to hang with those two guys, to be completely honest with you. I mean, they're just firing on all cylinders right now.
See, this, I know we're going back to when
we asked the tough questions on the Sports Box, Brand. We got to get, I
know. It's been so long since I've been on a show, man. It's been a long break for me. No, it's like I'm looking at the Western Conference, and it's just, I think my main hope, and this is just reminiscing, is that the Kraken make a deep run, right? Like, I love that story of the Golden Knights did in their inaugural season, making it all the way to the Stanley Cup.
I'm sure you did love that because your team won the Cup that year.
I loved it because I thought they were the weakest team that could have come out. But no,
Kraken over the Avs.
It's easy for teams like Colorado and Vegas to be, and like even Edmonton to be overshadowed because of what Boston did and the pressure on the East Coast teams. I just don't see that same kind of pressure on those teams from the West. And so I think it's gonna be I don't even know how to say it. I think there's less pressure. They're going to be a little bit more free flowing. Like, I don't think anybody saw Vegas coming in and being the 1 seed. I mean, everybody knows what Colorado, but they're not the same team that they were last year. I hope Connor McDavid makes a big run, but I wouldn't say that Colorado is being disrespected. I just think there's a lot that's been going on, and they're flying under the radar, which is scary for a team that good to fly under the radar because they lack that pressure that can weigh teams down.
Sure. I just thought as we were talking, is it fair for me to say that the New Jersey Devils are a poor man's Edmonton Oilers?
No.
Is not fair?
Yes. It's not.
I see some similarities. I see high-end talent. Highly drafted high-end talent. I see one-ish, really good power play-ish defenseman, what they just got actually, and I see question marks in goal.
See, I say like a poor man's Toronto would probably be a better.
They're really all kind of built the same, aren't they?
Yeah.
So that's kind of my thing, right? Like, does that work?
I like Toronto's high end a little bit better. I think Toronto's high end's a little deeper than Edmonton. I think like that's the bigger, like you have legitimately Draisaitl and McDavid carry that team, and you have more, I feel like, high end talent in the Devils than you would Edmonton.
Would you believe I told you that RNH was 9th in points?
He had 104 points this year.
But
Obviously,
Everybody. I mean, I could have 104 points. Playing
is that an outlier though, based on expectations?
I mean, it could be product of your environment, sure.
What, Hyman had a ton of goals.
Yeah.
How many goals did he have?
He had 36 goals. I mean, he was, again, they got 4 guys in the top 24.
Yep.
I don't know. Well, we'll start with the Central Division and those Colorado Avalanche. They are minus 260 against the playoff debut of the Seattle Kraken, who are plus 210 in the series. Colorado, again, won the Stanley Cup a year ago. Seattle entered the league a year ago, and now they're in a first-round matchup. If you're Colorado coming off your Stanley Cup, we talked about the fact that they're a little bit disrespected. 109 points in the regular season, good enough for the second-best record out west. But they lost Landeskog for the whole year. There was talk could he come back? Could he come back? Could he come back? In my infinite wisdom, I drafted him in the league to put him on IR, thinking at some point he'd come back. Well, that did not materialize clearly. From the Kraken side of thing, it's not quite the Vegas Golden Knights in that they're not in the Cup Finals in their inaugural season, but they really do have some nice pieces to build around, especially down the middle with Matty Beniers, who probably wins the Calder Trophy this year. Shane Wright's not even on the team yet. Jared McCann, another good year there. I like some things Seattle is doing. If there's any team that's happy to be here, though, it's this one. And I think that their prize for their 40-point jump in the standings is the buzzsaw that is known as the Colorado Avalanche. I think if there's any series that could be a sweep, it's this one.
well, I mean, here's the thing. This is the absolute last opponent you want to where your team has no goaltending. But Seattle has no goaltending. I mean, but all their goalies on the season had below. I mean, their save percentage as a team is below 900. Martin Jones had an 890, and he's injured, by the way. So, yeah, good old Martin Jones. That fills you with confidence.
Why do guys leave the Flyers and go play well elsewhere?
Yeah.
Wonder why.
And then their other goalie is Philip Grubauer, who obviously the Avalanche know pretty well. So I do really like what Seattle's doing. Very young team. I love Beniers. I think McCann, once again, why the hell did Pittsburgh protect Jeff Carter over this guy who's way younger and just scored 40 goals? But, it is what it is. Yeah. But and I will say this, I do love Vince Dunn. I think he's really adding that offensive element to his game, because I think he's always been pretty solid defensively. Yeah, but it's Colorado. I mean, let's be honest. This is not a team where you want bad goaltending with McKinnon, Rantanen, McCarr, all those guys and whatnot. So, I hate to say it because I do really like what this team is doing. I hope I'm wrong. Don't think I'm going to be. I got the Abs, and I'll be generous and say 5 games.
Avs in 5 as well. I think Matty Beniers will have his playoff moment and take one from them, and maybe in overtime. But it's a bad matchup. They're going to be there eventually. The Kraken. There's some good guys coming up, but they're so far away. Even though they had 100 points, they're still so far away. But the Seattle Hacksaws they're going to be there eventually. I just like saying that to piss off Flyers fans, by the way.
Dave Hackstall. He was terrible, I heard.
He actually, some of the Flyers had their best seasons under him. And then they were like, well, can't be having that. So, What do you think, Brent?
For me, it's going to be Colorado in either 4 or 5. I think it's going to be a quick one. However, Grubauer did play well. He only gave up 1.7 goals against in the 3 games he played against Colorado. But I just don't. Colorado's got too much offense, too much firepower. Cale Makar is one of the best. I don't see Seattle being able to maintain against Colorado.
Like I said, I think if there's a sweep anywhere, I think it's here. I think Seattle can take one. I think Seattle can take game 3. I think it makes a bit of just a crazy atmosphere there for their first playoff game, but I don't see a Vegas run here. I'll put it to you that way.
Me neither.
And staying in the Central Division, we have the second seeded Dallas Stars at minus 140, taking on the 3 seed Minnesota Wild at plus 120, one of the tighter series from a betting perspective. This is the second all-time matchup between the two teams. In 2016, Dallas took the series in 6 games. And maybe just interesting to me because Dallas moved from Minnesota back in 1993. So the Dallas Stars were once the Minnesota North Stars. So, I mean, that's interesting to me because I think people in Minnesota probably still hold a grudge. The fact that, Dallas, they left there, they got a different team 7 years later.
The circle of life.
From the Dallas perspective, I love Jason Robertson. He was on my fantasy team.
Flyers could have had
Great
him.
year. Could have had him. Actually, I played the wrong video before. I meant to play this one. We'll just let this one run since I don't know what the hell I'm doing, and it's 9:32 on the East Coast.
This is good enough.
It's fine. But when you look at these teams, both of them have some elite offensive talent. From the Dallas perspective, it's obviously you guys like Jason Robertson, but then even on Minnesota, Kirill Kaprizov, a 5th-round pick, just unbelievable offensive talent. And it's an interesting matchup to me because I don't know what to make of these teams. Like on the record, I think Dallas will be a playoff team this year. And boy, am I completely wrong about that. Minnesota trade away Jordan Greenway at the deadline, almost in a selling move, but I mean, they're fine.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily, Ottinger I think is the better goalie in the series. I kind of like the Stars offensive defenseman a little bit better in Heiskanen. I think it's a close series. Like I think.
And Ryan Suter.
Yeah, the former Minnesota Wild, who the Minnesota Wild are still paying now to play against them. The circle of life. Yeah, this is a tough series for me though, because Dallas can be run and gun. Minnesota's got their offensive talent as well. This is probably the toughest series I think of the bunch to pick, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Dallas, like you said, I mean, Ottinger's the better goalie. And I'm curious to see what he does on this stage. This is really his big test. He's got all the skill in the world. They have all the offense that they could possibly. I mean, Sagan's they went from first line to third line overnight. And they're good. They're deep. Dallas is deep. I think they're a lot deeper than Minnesota. Minnesota has some top level. They remind me a little bit of like Carolina, some top end guys, but after that, it kind of falls off a cliff. But again, Minnesota is also very young, and they're going to be back. They're not going anywhere. I don't think they're going to be a playoff team this year, but they have plenty of talent in the pipeline, so they're going to be here for a while. But I think Dallas takes this. I'll do Dallas in 6.
I'm going to go with them. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say I'm going to take the Minnesota North Stars in this series for a couple of reasons. Number one, obviously the goaltending. I love Ottinger. I mean, we all saw what he did on coming in the playoff stage last year against the Flames. He was absolutely phenomenal. He had a good regular season this year. On the other side, you got an aging Fleury and Gustafsson, who's barely played in the NHL, but he was great when he did play. Go ahead.
This is the first time I've ever agreed with Blair Kelly.
What did he say?
Me too, because I don't know who
He
it is.
sucked at hockey.
I agree.
They do.
But I just think Dallas has small advantages. First of all, obviously, like the goaltending, like I said. But defensively, I don't see that stud offensive defenseman on Minnesota. Like, who's their best defenseman? Spurgeon, Brodin. Those guys aren't even close to an impact a guy like Heiskanen can have. And then offensively, I think Dallas just has a little bit more, not just depth-wise, but up front as well. I think for Minnesota, I love Kaprizov. Zuccarello's solid. Matt Boldy, good extension for them. He's a solid young player. Eriksson Ek is solid, but I think he's on the injury report. I haven't kept up with it, but I'm pretty sure he's on there. But with Dallas, Robertson was incredible this season at 109 points, 46 goals. But then you add in Ben. He had a good season. Pavelski, I mean, the guy still plays like he's 28 years old, even though he's 38. You add in Rupe Hintz as well, who had a really good season. Mm-hmm. So that's 4 guys right there. And then you got some wild cards. I'm still not completely giving up on Tyler Seguin. He's been very disappointing the last 2 years. But we know when he's firing on all cylinders what he can do. And I like Dallas's depth better. So I think it's a close series, but I like what Dallas is having a little bit more. Not really sold on either of these teams going deep in the playoffs. I like the teams in the Pacific a little bit more, and obviously Colorado. But I think Dallas can win this one in 6.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at special teams. You have Dallas that's top 5 in both kill and power play. You have Minnesota who's got a bottom 10 offense. I'm going to take Dallas in 5. Could it be close? Sure. I just think Dallas has way too much skill. And I give them a slight edge in goal as well.
I think it goes the distance. I think these two teams are close. I really do. I'll take Dallas at home, not necessarily because it's a great home ice advantage. I think Minnesota's a major. I think it's going to be tougher for Dallas to play in Minnesota than vice versa. I'm just going to take Dallas's goaltending, frankly. Dallas was a bit of a surprise team last year. They took Calgary to the limit. It took double overtime, I think, in Game 7, and it was Goudreau who scored that goal. He isn't there anymore, obviously. It's tough, though, because I think that the line tells you, like, how thin this matchup is. And I think if Minnesota goes into Dallas and wins the first game, again, things can change. Don't think either team needs the first game. But I think the most talented individual player in the series is Kaprizov. No insult intended to Jason Robertson, but I do think that Dallas's offense is more level. Like, I think they can lose a guy and still be okay. Whereas Minnesota, like, I think if you lose Kaprizov, like, it's just, you don't have that alpha anymore. Like, I like Boldy a lot, but he's not that alpha the way that Kaprizov is. So give me Dallas by a relatively thin margin, frankly, in this one. We go over to the Pacific side of things, and the Vegas Golden Knights are -170, the Pacific Division winners, against the second wild card, the Winnipeg Jets, who are +140. This was a matchup that was the Western Conference Final that the Golden Knights took in 5 games en route to the Stanley Cup Final, where they lost to Brand's Washington Capitals in 2018. When you look at things from a Vegas perspective, Mark Stone has been out since January 12th. That's my son's birthday. He's back now from his back injury. Back conveniently enough when the cap doesn't matter and it's the postseason. He might be this year's Nikita Kucherov. When you look at things from a Jets perspective, they have the better goaltending in the series. And I think that they're the heavier team in the series. Most people don't think about Winnipeg as a hockey hotbed, but their top 6 is very good, very deep. Hellebuck is probably the best goaltender in the West coming into the playoffs.
Top 5.
Easily in the league. We talk about live underdogs. Remember, this is the old 2-7. This is the old 1-8 matchup. And look how tight this is.
It's ridiculous.
There's a reason for it.
Major. Oh, go ahead.
What does Vegas do well that would separate them from Winnipeg in this series?
Can I give you one quick thing right here? Vegas won 52 games this year. Only 38 of them were in regulation. As I'm looking through the teams in the league, well, actually, Colorado only had 36. I mean, whatever. Edmonton won 45 regulation games. The Vegas only won 38. That's interesting subplot.
Wow.
I guess what they do well is they win extra time games in a shootout.
I mean, I'm just looking at Vegas' stats right here, and they do everything okay, but they're not great at anything. They're 14th in goals for, they're 11th in goals against. Their power play is 20%, which wouldn't even be close to top 10. Their PK is 77%. And when I look at matchups, I think a major advantage Winnipeg has is obviously in net. I mean, Vegas has had a carousel of goalies this year. They played about 5 different guys this year. Logan Thompson has looked pretty good as a rookie, but I mean, Connor Hellebuck is elite. I mean, he's just an elite goalie. So Winnipeg has an advantage there. And when I look at the players individually, Josh Morrissey on the blue line for Winnipeg is just an absolute monster. I mean, he's a point per game defenseman. The guy is insane. And, forward-wise, you got Kyle Connor, you got Mark Scheifele. They have talent up front. And when I look at what Vegas has, they don't have that one guy, right? Like, they don't have a Robertson or a Kaprizov, like we just mentioned. Like, I like Jack Eichel, who's point per game. But this is, there's a lot of pressure on Jack Eichel because this is the biggest moment in his career. Basically, he never was even close to contending with the Sabres, and he was injured last year for most of the year. This is a big moment for him. But then past that, I mean, Stevenson, Marchessault, Riley Smith, William Karlsson. I mean, these are all solid guys. But they're not
Stevenson.
Chandler Stevenson, right? But these
Yeah,
aren't
like 6 or 7
guys.
points.
These aren't guys, though, that you're looking at like, man, that's a difference maker. They're just a bunch of solid guys, is what I'm saying. So for the fact Vegas is the number one and Winnipeg's 8, and Vegas had 111 points, I don't know. I don't really see it. I'll probably still give Vegas the edge, but I'll be honest, I think it's pretty close. I'm going to go Vegas in 7 on this one.
I'm going to take the Jets. I just think they're a tougher team. I think they have plenty of goal scoring. And like we've all talked about, Connor Hellebuck is very, very good. He's top 5 goalie in the league. They're going to give Las Vegas everything they can. I think Las Vegas is soft, to be completely honest with you. I think they're very soft. I think getting Stoneback is going to help that. But for the most part, they're just – there's not a lot of, like, grit, fire on that team. I think you got it more with Winnipeg. And Kyle Connor is one of the best players in the league. And they'll come out and they'll hit you. Give me the Jets in 7.
It's a hard one because you're looking at it. Mm-hmm. The Golden Knights finished their season 16-3-3. Over the last 30 games, Winnipeg was an even 500. It's like I'm looking at the Jets and the Knights, and I'm like, I don't want to pick either one, but like someone's gonna get out. I'm gonna lean the Knights, Golden Knights, just because of Eichel and Stone. I think it's gonna take 7. I mean, they were the first seed for a reason, right? So I'm gonna lean into that. But they don't do anything great. They just do everything okay. They're the jack of all trades, master of none.
That scares me.
Yes. But Winnipeg just underperformed towards the end of the season. Like they're not a team that's scared. I mean, you got Hellebuck, but he can't do it all by himself. No. If he only lets in 2 a game, but they can only score 1, they still end up losing.
I'm a little concerned about Winnipeg defensively, but like we all said,
I'm a little concerned about the Vegas Knights in goal. I mean, since February 20th,
they have a defense, but no goalie.
Yeah, but since February 25th, they've played more human beings in goal than are on this show right now.
Yeah, I think Paul McCree filled in once.
Yeah, that was against St. Louis. It was over here. Yeah, Patera. I don't know what to make of that. And the thing is, Winnipeg, maybe because it's Winnipeg. I mean, the most famous guy from there is Chris Jericho, but wrestling reference. They got guys. And, if you start looking at some of the names that Winnipeg has, and Winnipeg's some hellhole in the middle of, Western Canada, but Kyle Connor, Josh Morrissey, Mark Scheifele, Dubois has got 1 foot out the door, but even he had 63 points this year.
Can't be any worse than Chicago. No. You're talking about hellholes.
No, but it's like in the middle of nowhere is my point. Like it's like this 1-horse town and whatever. My point is that Manitoba. I think the Jets are more dangerous offensively. Like
Kyle Connor,
Mark Scheifele, Pierre-Luc Dubois, Blake Wheeler. I mean, like this team's underachieved for a while. Hellebuck, I think, played 13 games in a row to get him in.
Nikolai Ehlers.
That's the difference to me is the goaltending. I mean, Stone's going to play, but Stone hasn't played in close to 4 months.
He's going to be jacked up, ready to go, though. He's going to be Jack Eichel'd up.
I love Jack Eichel. I mean, I was banging the table to be a Ranger for the better part of a year and a half. But again, this is a 1-8 matchup, but it doesn't feel like a 1-8 matchup. It really doesn't.
No.
I'm Irving Winnipeg in 6.
They got rid of their problem last year.
Who do you start in Vegas to give you the best shot?
Jonathan Quick.
Yeah.
Because of he's been there and done that. I really wanted to see a Kings Knights series. I really did.
Where did they trade Quick to first?
Columbus.
That's right. Yeah. I knew he went somewhere random.
And he had a storied career there.
He did, yeah.
I saw a guy with a Quick jersey, Columbus jersey. Yeah. Again, I don't. The best news for anybody coming out of the other series is that this is the matchup here, because I think that the other one might be the de facto. I don't know. I would have more. I'll tell you what. I would have more confidence in Winnipeg winning 2 rounds than Vegas winning 2 rounds. Was that fair?
Yeah.
It's tough. I mean, I'd bet Winnipeg. I wouldn't bet. But again, doesn't it? Same kind of thing. Doesn't that line beg you to take Vegas? Only minus 170. They're only minus 170, and they're the number 1 seed in the West.
You know, the Vegas Golden Knights are Tim Tebow, right? They just win. There's nothing spectacular about it. They just win.
They win to a point, and then they don't.
Well, if they have God on their side, they're unstoppable.
Vegas is not where God is. I'll tell you that right now.
No, definitely
not. Last matchup here in the first round is the second-seeded Edmonton Oilers. They are minus 250, bigger difference, against the 3-seeded LA Kings, who are plus 200. This is a rematch of the first round from last season, where the Oilers took that in a wild series in 7 games. The Los Angeles Kings have not won a playoff round since the 2014 Stanley Cup Finals, where they beat the Rangers to win the Stanley Cup. They have not won a playoff round since. When you look at these teams, Edmonton's got star after star after star. And
this is the worst first-round matchup, I think, though.
LA feels, though, like they're a bit of a year ahead. Guys like Arthur Kaliev play a bit of a role. Adrian Kemp, another big year. But it feels like their rebuild is only for so long. Like I feel like there's still more coming.
You don't rebuild and go out and get Fiala in the offseason.
That was a good deal for them.
It was. Absolutely.
I like Fiala a lot. Kings goaltending, I guess it got improved when they got Korpisalo. I don't love Korpisalo.
Yeah.
It's better than Edmonton's. Can you really pick against McDavid here?
I think
go
ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like Brian kind of touched on at the end there, that, there's really not a difference maker in goal. I mean, Korpisalo was pretty good once he got traded there. He had I think a 915 save percentage or something with the Kings. But obviously he struggled on that terrible Blue Jackets team. The other side, I already kind of touched on Skinner. Like the guy, but again, a guy with not a lot of experience. So then, it comes down to the skaters. And I think with LA, first of all, their power play is incredible. It was 25% this year. But at the same time, Edmonton was in the bottom half of the league in penalties taken. So it's probably going to be a series decided in 5-on-5. And look, I really like the Kings. I like what they're building. I love Byfield. I love Velarde. They're set up well for the future. But their top guys, they're just very good players. They're not elite players. I love Fiala. I think Kemp had a great year. And obviously Kopitar is still there doing their thing. But when you look at the other side, they just don't have McDavid or a Draisaitl. And I think that's going to be the difference in a series where goaltending is not going to be a factor. Neither of these teams have defenses I look at as absolutely shut down. I mean, I do like what Edmonton did. I think Ekholm is a great addition, but, they're still not a shutdown defense. LA is still kind of, building it up. I just think the elite players make a difference. And to be honest, Edmonton is better than they were last year. And I think the Kings have gotten worse because, look, I know Quick was terrible last year, but he was good, this year, but he was good in the playoffs last year and he has experience. Korpisalo doesn't. So I think they regressed in that area. So to be honest, I got Edmonton winning this series, and unfortunately, I don't really think it's going to be close. I think Edmonton could win this. If they're firing on all cylinders, they can win this series in 5 games. They might have one game where they're a bit off, but I think they can win this series convincingly.
Last year was tough. I think this year is going to be tough. I think LA's young for the most part. I think you got veteran guys like Doughty and Kopitar who can shut down McDavid and Draisaitl. I mean, I don't know how much they can shut him. Anybody can shut down McDavid, but if there's anybody that can, it's those 2 guys. They've been there, done that. It's just going to depend on how they perform in goal, because obviously Edmonton's so good offensively. It's going to be a tough series. I still think it's going to be like last year. I think. I do think Edmonton and everybody, that was a big surprise last year, taking them to 7 games. I think it's going to go 7 again. I really do. But I think Edmonton has just enough firepower.
I'm seeing sweep. I like the Oilers. I like Ekholm was a great addition. Stuart Skinner, possible Calder Cup, Calder Trophy winner. I think they've got a possibility with Skinner of actually finding someone that could last long term if he can continue to progress. I believe he's still in his early 20s, like 23, 24. But I just Los Angeles doesn't have what it's going to take to keep up scoring wise. I mean, Edmonton outscored just under 4 goals a game. Like, I don't see Los Angeles being able to put a game together more of 2 or 3.
And they don't have the defense to, keep them under that number. Last year they didn't either. I mean, last year was a bit of a wide open series too. So not really much of a surprise there. Yeah, I mean, I don't think the Kings are that much of a live dog. I think Edmonton takes this. I don't even think to take 7. I think it might take 6 or less. I think if Edmonton, comes back up 3-1, they put them away in 5. So I think the Kings need to come out 2-2 to extend that series. I do think Edmonton finds a way there. When you look at, as we've gone through all the series, give me who's in your conference finals, who's in your cup finals, who wins Conn Smythe if your team.
Who wants to go first?
I'll go last.
I know you're going to go last.
Well, if Brian will go last, I guess I'll go first because I've gone first a lot tonight, apparently. Conference finalist, West, Colorado, obviously. And probably, I think it'll be the exact same as last year. Colorado and Edmonton. In the East, Boston, because I think they can, if they get past the Panthers and they play Toronto, I think they have the mental edge over Toronto. And even if it's Tampa, I think Boston could beat them. And the other team, I'm probably going to go with the Rangers, honestly, just because I think if they beat the Devils, which I believe they will, like I said, I'm not really sold on the Hurricanes, and obviously I think they could beat the Islanders. So, and then from that, I'd probably go Colorado, Boston in the Stanley Cup Finals, and I would pick Colorado to win it in a close series, probably 6 or 7 games. Conn Smythe, McKinnon, that guy is just unbelievable, absolutely incredible player.
All right. In the East, it's going to be Boston and the Rangers. I think whoever comes out of that Atlantic bracket, this is going to be too much, to be completely honest with you. Sorry, Brian. But I've been saying that since last year. The Atlantic is so good. So whoever comes out of that, they're going to the Cup, and they're probably going to win it. I do think it's going to be the Oilers and the Avs in the other series, or in the West. I think the Oilers come out of that one. I think Colorado is vulnerable right now. I think they're banged up, and they had a long run last year. And I think they're just so hot, the Oilers. I think this is their time, and McDavid's going to carry them there. And I do think they're going to win it all and beat Boston. So I have the Oilers over with, obviously, McDavid. NHL's dream for him to win the Conn Smythe. Dream come true for the NHL.
Oh man! So in the East, I'm gonna go surprising myself a little bit. I'm gonna see Maple Leafs and Rangers with the Rangers going through.
Brian just got a little tiny Woody.
I know you got so excited right there. And then on the West,
Tom, that was the first 5 minutes. We got through that very quickly.
That wasn't much to talk about. Talk more about my shirt.
I'm gonna go as Stars versus Oilers in the Western Conference, with the Oilers making it through, and playing. It'd be at Edmonton and New York.
Ooh, that would be a good one for the NHL.
Yes. Give me Edmonton.
So what's interesting is that the 3 of you all said you would take the field over Boston, but 2 of you put Boston in the final.
Yeah,
Just saying.
that's how it goes.
Yeah, but if I had a bet, just because the Atlantic, not what I think.
I'm just putting that out there. That's all.
Yeah, I know.
I'm going to be really boring here, and I'm going to tell you that the Final Four is the Final Four from last year. I think the Rangers find a way. I think they beat whoever comes. I am more concerned about the Devils than I am about Carolina or the Islanders. I think they can beat the Devils. So I'm putting the Rangers in the conference final. I'm going to go out on a big limb, and I'm going to say that Tampa gets by Toronto, and then Vasilevsky knocks out Boston. So I think we're back to Tampa and New York, and I think this time around, the Rangers get through. What I will say is that if it is Rangers-Boston, I don't think the Rangers beat the Bruins. I need somebody else to beat the Bruins for me because I don't think the Rangers can do it. I mean, they can. It's just not as likely, right? So assuming it's not Boston.
Is this what you want to happen or what you think is
No, it's what I think can absolutely happen because, again, Tampa Bay has been that team, okay? Regular season aside, their best regular season was a sweep in the first round. The regular season doesn't matter to this team. They just have to survive long enough to get there. I don't believe in Toronto a little bit, not against Tampa Bay. And Tampa Bay can beat the Bruins because of the goaltending, right? Ullmark had a great year. I need to see you do it in the postseason. Like I need to see.
I think Boston's the Avs from last year. Questions about the goaltending, but just star-studded everywhere else.
It's not the worst comparison I've heard. I could see where that's coming from. I don't think Boston. I think the teams that Boston will play are harder than the teams Colorado have to play. Like I think last year, Colorado was in the finals. Like it wasn't even. I think they were minus money at one point.
Yeah, the Blues of all teams.
Yeah, like it wasn't like they had this run of great teams they had to play to get there, right?
Yeah.
So I'll go Tampa Bay and I'll go New York, and I think the Rangers would beat. If it's Tampa Bay, the Rangers beat them. If it's Boston, they don't.
Okay.
Out west, I'm going to go with the same matchup as last year, which is Colorado and Edmonton, because I think you're going to get the Avs and the Stars, and I think the Avs are a little too much for Dallas. But I think it's still very tight. And then I just think the Oilers beat whoever comes out of Vegas, Winnipeg, and I think it's probably Winnipeg. So I think you're going to get Colorado and the Oilers. I think you end up with a Stanley Cup final of the Avalanche and the Rangers, which has storylines galore because the goaltending matchup. If that's the matchup that you get, I'm going to be a very happy camper. If the Rangers can avoid Boston, I think they can win the entire thing. The key there is avoiding Boston. I need somebody else to beat Boston. And I don't care if it's Florida. I don't care if it's Toronto. I don't care if it's Tampa. I don't care if it's U3. If somebody can beat Boston, I think the Rangers are going to the finals.
How badly did y'all play against Boston this year?
Boston, I think, won every game, but they were closer than you would think. When they played Boston the last time, they had no Ryan Lindgren. Kane's second game, they actually were with them for 2 periods. They just blew it in the third. But it's still the regular season. So, again, I'm going to go with Tampa until I don't. I think the Rangers are a touch better than Tampa. I think Boston's better than Tampa, but I think that Vasilevsky in that kind of a playoff series, I don't know that Ullmark can do that yet. So I don't feel necessarily great about that. The Rangers, I think, of any team in this entire tournament are the biggest wild card because they could lose in the first round or win the whole goddamn thing. I really feel that way. It's not even a cop-out answer. Because if the Devils' speed overwhelms them and they don't have an answer for it, they're out in the first round, possibly in 5. They get an answer for that. They have a veteran team that's been there, done that before, that did this last year. I'm not as concerned about who they play in the second round. And if the right team, if anything but Boston's in the third round, I feel good about that. So I've been saying it. You guys, if you watch Blue Jays, I've been saying it all year. Yeah. There is no team with as wide a variance of outcome than the Rangers. I don't think Vegas can win the Stanley Cup. Mm-mm. I think Colorado can, but Colorado's not going to lose in the first round. So, I don't think Edmonton's going to lose in the first round, right? So the Rangers legitimately can lose in the first round. I'm the first person to say that. I don't think they're going to. I prefer to play Carolina. It didn't happen that way. But they can win the absolute. Again, if they avoid the Bruins, I think they can win the whole thing. They can beat Boston. I wouldn't say it's likely. And I think if it's them, and I think I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say the sexy pick would be, or the easy pick is Igor wins the Conn Smythe. I think it's Adam Fox. I think it's Brian Leetch 2.0. That's what I would say about that. Now, because I said that, it's going to be Devils in 5, and I'm first person to tell you that. I get it, right? So, but to be fair, for what it's worth, I said last year the Rangers would lose in the conference final, which is what they did. So, we'll wrap up the show today with a quick: who is going to win the draft lottery? But you see the odds there. Anaheim has a solid 18.5% chance to win the draft lottery, which is still less than 1 in 5.
So let's see. Where does the NHL want Bedard to play?
Basically, yes. That's my question, right? So my question is, where does the NHL?
Pittsburgh.
Where does the NHL want to stick Connor Bedard?
1.5% chance, man. I'm just saying. Absolutely rig it, please.
I mean, listen. That's fine with that. Me personally, I think it's Chicago. I've had this feeling all year that it ends up being Chicago. So I'm going to stick with my gut on that.
Freaking unbelievable. I'm just praying every day that he goes to the Flyers.
Well, you better. Your God's not listening yet. You better pray harder.
Well, that's why every day have my rosary out.
Getting the best odds typically seems like a curse from what I've seen from these lotteries. So, you know what? Bedard and Gaudreau, Columbus. That'd be an interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
Could you imagine the NHL if you get these generational talents?
It would be sick.
And one ends up.
They would make Columbus trade the pick to Philadelphia.
Yeah, but so McDavid ends up in Edmonton, and then Bedard ends up in American Edmonton. How do you get to that?
No, I think Columbus is American Winnipeg.
Okay,
or Vancouver.
Similarly, yeah. And by the way, I just want to bring this up again because Lou brought it up. If you're taking the anti-Boston case again, the President's Trophy winner doesn't generally win the Stanley Cup.
Mm-hmm.
And we see, and the President's Trophy winner, actually, I think doesn't get out of the second round.
In this format, yes.
So I'm just you can tell me the opposite, and that's perfectly fine. I don't feel I cheerlead the Rangers at all. I really don't.
Yeah, and then when I say about the Eagles, it's
you cheerlead the Eagles like it's your job. That's a whole different thing.
I do not.
Again,
I just said they were going to the Super Bowl because they had the easiest path. But I'm a cheerleader. Now he has them going to beating Boston, the best team ever.
Hold on.
Then beating the defending champs.
Sir, I actually specifically said they would not beat Boston. I need somebody else to beat Boston for me.
Right, correct. You said they could, though.
No, all I'm saying is, historically, if the President's Trophy winner does not get out of the second round, that's good for me.
The trend.
Correct. You like trends.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we're on the same page here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any closing thoughts, guys?
I'm going to go ahead on a limb and say Washington gets a top 2 pick in this year's draft. I think the NHL wants to Ovechkin getting that scoring record. You're talking about a rig? That'd be one of them.
What are your thoughts, real quick? I'm going to ask the 3 of your teams all have problems. I'm going to end the show with just a quick minute with each.
I don't have enough time, Brian, in the night.
I will make it quick for you.
Talk about my team's
Let me start with Grant real quick because you brought it up. The Laviolette mutual agreement to go separate ways. Surprised by that? Not surprised by that? Right move? Wrong move?
Like he was stuck on these aging veterans that did nothing for anybody. And then we have so much young talent that has potential, and he just let them wither away in the AHL. I mean, Hershey's made the playoffs down there, so I'll get to watch some playoff hockey online when I can find that stream. But he chose to go with guys that had no or limited future value and sit rookies and guys that are young, and instead of trying to develop them was like, It reminds me of Buck Showalter in baseball. He was the same way with Baltimore Orioles the last few years he was there. He's all about these aging veterans and less about the young talent that they have. It doesn't make any sense to me. You have guys like Connor McMichael, Joe Snively, like these young guys, Alexei Protas, that came up and they played well, but you're not giving them chances. Instead, you're going with Nick Aube-Kubel, right? You're going with Lars Eller, who struggled. It doesn't make any sense to play a 33-year-old veteran over a young guy because either way, you're not making the playoffs. So you might as well try to establish some NHL presence for some young guys and let them develop alongside Ovechkin and Backstrom and Wilson.
Yeah, for the Flyers.
Well, I was going to ask you this question.
I'm sorry.
You were asking me. I'm going to ask you a question.
Sorry.
So, a lot's been talking about Danny Briere doing this rebuild. Here's my problem with that. They have a bunch of players who are signed until post the second apocalypse. So, like, I don't even know what does rebuilding actually mean. Sean Couturier is signed until the end of 2030. That is not a joke. Okay. Ryan Ellis is signed for 4 more seasons. I don't even think he's alive. He's like Bigfoot. Travis Sanheim, who was benched in Calgary, his hometown, is signed for an 8-year deal starting next season.
Yeah.
Joel Farabee signed at the end of 2028. I guess my question here is, what do you even do? Like, what do you do?
I think you move what you can to start. I think Danny Briere will. I think he's pretty in tune with what the consensus among the fan base is that, we've stunk for forever. So I think there's going to be – he's in that weird position where he needs to kind of make his mark, but then he also needs to – there's also some pressure to do it quickly too. So I think he's going to move whatever he can now, kind of let the dominoes fall as they will, so to speak. The best thing that could possibly happen to Danny Briere is exactly what happened to Chris Drury. They win the draft lottery.
Well, that actually happened to
before. I know, I'm saying that's the best thing that could happen for him. That's the only thing that's really going to catapult this thing. Move what you can, win the lottery, hopefully. I know hope's not a strategy there, Brian.
Not a strategy.
In this case, it is. It's all they have.
It's like
they should have lost more, but it is what it is. Don't sign free agents. There's no rush to this. I know Danny's going to think there is, but there really isn't. He's going to have a fan base that is impatient. It's been a while since they were relevant, but he's got to see this thing out the way he wants, and do. He needs to not listen to management and do what he wants.
I actually think Briere has a unique opportunity in that. Remember when the Rangers sent out the letter and the fans were like all in? I think if the Flyers took a similar approach and said, we're going to do this the right way, I think the fans would actually be behind that. Mm-hmm. Like the promise of a different day, I think is enough to get people interested again.
Yeah. Noah referenced the Rangers letter a few times.
He did.
Even Sean Couturier has.
He did. Noah, the Penguins hired a rebuilding GM. They were surprised that the rebuilding GM wasn't good at building a current contender, and then fired the rebuilding GM. So it's almost like I can't believe this didn't work out. You've been begging for this for a couple of years now. To your credit, again, you've seen the writing on the wall. Most people are like, well, what are you going to do? The problem, I think, for them is they really put gasoline on a fire. So Brian Rust is signed through end of 28. Raquel is signed the end of 28. Letang, who is 35, is signed to the end of 28. Like, they have long-term contracts that they just cannot move, right? And even the fact that there's 3 more years of a 36-year-old Malkin, you can say they should go into rebuild, and I'm going to agree with you, right?
Yes.
I don't think that they can because, again, Crosby's there for 2 more years unless you trade him, in which case you got to trade Malkin. These guys have no movement clauses to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, this is a better Flyer situation in that you can't do a whole lot, but at least your team can potentially be a playoff team for what it's worth, right? I don't think in the short term or long term looks good.
No, I agree completely. I think, first of all, I agree with firing Hextall and Burke, and here's why. I liked getting Hextall first because this is a guy that obviously has no allegiances to the current Penguins players or whatnot. Like you guys said, a guy that's known for doing great with rebuilds. But then he goes out and he does everything a rebuilding team wouldn't do. Why are you re-signing Malkin and Letang when they're in their mid-30s? Look, I even told you this, Brian. I said they should consider trading Crosby, which might sound ridiculous, but you can get a ton back for Crosby. At least a few years ago, you can't get anything now because he's getting up there in age. But they do that. They extend Brian Rust. They trade for Mikael Granlund as a terrible contract with multiple years left just to play on a third-line minutes. What else? Oh, yeah, Jeff Petrie. 2 years left after this year, $6.25 million. Absolutely fantastic. Chris Letang extended until he's 41 years old. He had a stroke this year. I mean, and then just it makes no sense. He did exactly everything that he shouldn't do, pretty much. But like you said, it's too late. They've already gone into this path that they've chosen. It doesn't matter that they fired Hextall and Burke now. By the way, why was Brian Burke ever employed in this team? The biggest highlight of Brian Burke's management career is the Phil Kessel trade, which was an absolute disaster. I don't know why he was even employed with this team. I could at least see what they were trying to do with Hextall, but then Hextall did everything that you wouldn't expect him to do. And in my opinion, they have completely hamstrung this franchise for 3 to 4 years. And like you said, Brian, I've been telling you the past 3 years they should have rebuilt. They did not do it, and now they need to do it, but they can't. They're screwed. They're absolutely
that had Burke's fingerprints all over it.
They are absolutely unbelievably fucked for the next few years. And they can't even, they're not even going to win the draft lottery. Like, I would have preferred they lost 20 more games. You still don't make the playoffs, but you win the draft lottery. And you get a guy who's the best prospect since Connor McDavid, who's breaking all of McDavid's Jr.'s records. But nope, we're just going to, this retirement home. Hey, at least we can get their jerseys up in the rafters when these guys are 39 years old putting up 20 points a season. Man, it's just not good. Not good to say the least.
Selling tickets, baby.
Look, to your credit, you called it dead on.
Yeah.
You have. I mean, that's...
Yep. Back in the draft, we talked about it.
I don't want to be right, but they always prove me right. They always do everything wrong.
It's remarkable. Anyway.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you all for watching the Sports Box NHL Playoffs preview. Obviously, I'm sure all of you who are watching hope that I'm right. At least I would like to think you hope that I'm right. We'll probably try to do something, at least getting into free agency around the draft and everything like that. But I want to thank the guys for being good sports because, again, they are big hockey fans, but they don't have a lot to root for this offseason. At least, it is what it is. I think all three teams are in precarious positions that they're going to have to work through. We'll see if they can actually do that. To the credit of the Flyers and Penguins, they have released the people responsible. So at least you got that. Who's your GM these days, Brent? He's around still, right?
Brian McClellan.
Is his job just to make sure Ovechkin's happy? Like that's all he's doing, right?
Yeah.
No, his job is to not trade a player like Philip Forsberg for Martin Erath.
Oh my
just
God.
have that trade live in fucking infamy, right? I mean, I keep seeing Philip Forsberg's name come up, and every time I do, it's just like someone digging a knife straight into my heart.
That?
Oh.
Yeah, his job's not to do that.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. So, all right, guys, thank you for joining us. On behalf of the Sports Box, thank you for watching. Make sure you follow and like and share on all of your major socials at Sportsbox Sports. We keep growing and growing, and we can't do that without you. So thank you very much. On behalf of the boys, have a good night. Enjoy your hockey because come Tuesday, my life is going to be filled with stress and nausea.
Only for a little while.
Until if it goes Devils in 5, you called it tonight and jinxed it.
I told you that's possible. I'm not even shying away from that. Like I said that. Like that's that's extremely possible.
It's a cop out.
It's not. It's also real. Is it not the most real? That's the most realistic I can give you because that can happen. It can't happen to Boston. It can happen to the Rangers.
All right, guys.
Take care.
Cheers.